Chapter 1109. It had to be said that the question raised by the reporter with a rough accent was very sharp, and even the reporters around her couldn't help but make a commotion. How can you say that? Che and was angry, and he was about to question the reporter. However, before he could say anything, he was stopped by Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit, who had dealt with reporters several times, understood that he couldn't let Che and stand up for him at this time. Che and had just stepped into the entertainment industry, and his new movie was about to be released. It wouldn't be good if he was involved in a fight with reporters again. Poplar Fruit smiled slightly and said to the reporter, "I'm really sorry. The flash at the scene was too strong. I only wore sunglasses to protect Kiki's retina." Friends who understand medicine know that a child's retina is very fragile, and the flash can easily cause permanent damage. I won't say if this is everyone's consensus, but I believe that this is a request that all conscientious reporters shouldn't make. Although he was smiling and answering calmly, the sternness in Poplar Fruit's eyes could only be understood by the female reporter from Hong Kong. She was stunned, scared, and her body trembled. She even forgot how she escaped from this place. The unscrupulous reporter was quickly pushed away by others. A reporter from Sina Com came over and asked, "Poplar Fruit, on Sina Weibo, Han and you are both called the national father-in-law by netizens. Will today's meeting cause a conflict that we don't want to see?" This entertainment reporter's question was really strange, and the latter question was even more strange. Poplar Fruit shook his head with a smile and said, "How can it be? Thank you for everyone's love for Kiki. However, I think on the issue of the national father-in-law, I have the same opinion as Director Han. Well, all the people who call themselves son-in-law will become our enemies." Poplar Fruit let go of Fong Beibei's hand, and his right hand made a funny gesture to show off his muscles. He smiled and said, "If you want to take my daughter away, you have to ask my fist first." This caused a burst of laughter. Everyone understood that Poplar Fruit was joking. However, this was obviously a good news source. He had even thought of the content. The nation's father-in-law wants to marry Kiki through a martial arts competition? Sure, let's fight. We'll talk about it after we win. Everyone knew that Poplar Fruit was a superhero who could take on 8 people at once. This challenge was extraordinarily difficult. A lot of people would probably give up after thinking about it. There might still be hope for them to pursue Han Xiaoya. Who would have thought that Poplar Fruit's words would be heard by Kiki? She hurriedly leaned over and hugged Poplar Fruit's fist. She anxiously shook her head and said, I don't want to, Kiki, I don't want to be taken away by others." There was a burst of good-natured laughter in the reporters' area. Whether it was male or female reporters, when they saw Kiki's sad eyebrows and unhappy pouting mouth, they felt that the little girl's naivety and cuteness were cute. This scene was photographed by many reporters. This was probably the biggest gain of the premiere guests, right? Even if it was not included in the report on the new movie, there would be a small page for Kiki. There would definitely be many readers who would like this cute little girl. After answering this question, Poplar Fruit did not continue to be interviewed. He followed Che and Juan to the front of the cinema. As a new director, Han would warmly welcome every guest who walked on the red carpet. As for Poplar Fruit, he showed great enthusiasm. When Han heard that Che and Juan wanted to invite Poplar Fruit, he was ecstatic. Although Poplar Fruit's fame was not as famous as director, who would come in person later, rare things were precious. Poplar Fruit, who rarely appeared in public but did have millions of fans, would definitely be a good gimmick if he appeared at his press conference. Really, in order to promote the movie, Han also gave up his modesty as a scholar. In addition to the controversy caused by the actor deleting his Weibo, he also posted photos of the set from time to time to whet the fans' appetite. At today's premiere, he also carried the most eye-catching Madagascar in the movie, an Alaskan sled dog with compact facial features. "Director, this is my good brother Poplar Fruit, and this is Han. You are all in the literary industry, so you should have a lot to talk about." Che and Juan smiled and introduced them. "Hello, Mr. Yang. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your support." Han warmly shook hands with Poplar Fruit. "It's really an honor for a superhero to come to my movie premiere. The two did not have much interaction, but they belonged to the kind of young people who were very literary in their bones, especially Han Han. His works could be said to have influenced the generation of the 80s and 90s. You're welcome, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. We should be honored. Director Han Han may not know, but my girlfriend, Fong Beibei, and I are both your fans. Well, I grew up watching your works. Poplar Fruit pulled the shy Fong Beibei out. She blushed and said bravely, in addition to your books, I buy every issue of your magazine, Solo Group. Today, I finally saw the real person. Can you give me an autograph? You don't have to be too harsh on Fong Beibei. She's also at the age of chasing stars, and don't underestimate Han Han's influence on girls of the same generation. Compared to big stars like Feng Xiaofeng, Chen Bolin, and Chun Xiaoan, Han Han actually did not receive as much attention as them in the entertainment industry, and more voices of doubt. It was rare that at the movie premiere, a girl not only did not chase after a movie star, but also asked for his autograph as a fan of his books. Han Han was also a little flattered. Is that so? Han Han was stunned and smiled. Thank you for your support. It's not convenient now, but it's okay. After the premiere, I will ask my assistant to send it to you directly. Fong Beibei smiled with satisfaction. She shyly hid behind Poplar Fruit, letting Poplar Fruit and Han Han continue to chat. At this time, Kiki glanced at the meaty Madagascar next to her. Its black and white fur was as cute as a panda, and it immediately captured Kiki's soft heart. Almost forgetting her previous fear of the surrounding environment, Kiki asked her father to put her down and then pulled her father to Madagascar's side without any explanation. This puppy, which was still a baby, was still young, but it was still very cute at times. It had a chubby face, a big nose, and the lively eyes under its dark eye sockets kept looking at Kiki, who was beside it. What a beautiful puppy! Kiki's eyes lit up, and she excitedly said to her father. She wanted to touch it like Goldie, but she was a little embarrassed to do it, because Madagascar was being led by Chun Xiaoan. Chapter 11:10. The cute Madagascar made Kiki feel as if she had returned to the past, when she was still very young, but the memory was very clear. At that time, Goldie was also as petite as Little Motor. They drank milk together, crawled on the ground together, and then grew up together. Kiki stared at Little Motor's big round eyes in a trance. Little Motor also curiously looked at the little person with a nice smell in front of it. Its tongue stuck out half, pink, so cute. Little girl, do you want to touch it? Chun Xiaoan, who was wearing a retro jacquard Chong Sam, squatted down and gently smiled at Kiki and asked. Kiki, who was just immersed in the world of looking at Little Motor, was startled by Chun Xiaoan. She took a step back and hid half of her body behind Poplar Fruit. Timidly, she gathered a little courage and asked, Can I? Of course you can. Come, it's called Little Motor, what's your name? Chun Xiaoan's Taiwanese accent was not as strong as other Taiwanese celebrities, but the charm could still be heard. Thank you, my name is Kiki. Kiki unconsciously changed a little bit of Taiwanese accent. She politely bowed and then let go of Poplar Fruit's hand. She squatted down and gently stroked Madagascar's little head. Kiki, such a nice name. Chun Xiaoan was worried that Little Motor would bite, so she looked at it from the side. However, Little Motor did not resist. Instead, under Kiki's touch, it squinted its eyes and looked very comfortable. I also have a daughter, a few years younger than her. Han Han came to Poplar Fruit's side and said with a smile. Today, he did not bring his daughter. In fact, Han Han also rarely brought his daughter to appear in the public eye. Xiao Yi, right? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Just now, a reporter asked me, but it seems that your daughter was also born in 2011, right? That's the same age as Kiki. Han Han asked in surprise. Is that so? Then your daughter must be really tall. If there's a chance, we can introduce them to each other. Generally speaking, with Han Han's aloof personality, he would not deliberately befriend someone. But Poplar Fruit was different. Poplar Fruit was a translation master that all authors wanted to work with. Han Han also hoped that her books could be sold overseas. Even though she did not have such plans for the next few years, it would not be a wrong choice to make friends with Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit's thoughts were simpler. He smiled and said, Okay. Kiki also liked to make new friends, especially those who were younger than her. If she can play with Xiaoyi, she will definitely be very happy. Xiaoyi was a few months younger than the Beckham's little seven. According to Kiki's care for her sister little seven, Kiki would also like her sister Xiaoyi. Of course, Poplar Fruit and the others stayed at the door for a long time. In order not to disturb Han Han's welcoming, Poplar Fruit carried Kiki and took Fong Bei Bei to bid farewell to Han Han and the others. He also had to enter the cinema to meet up with the rest of the group. Wu Wu no, Kiki wants a small motor. Chi Chi, who was reluctant to leave, pouted her little mouth and threw a tantrum after entering the cinema. Fong Bei Bei hugged her and coaxed her, but Chi Chi's mood was not good. What small motor? Zheng Yujie heard, turned her head, and asked curiously. No, she just saw the Alaskan Malamute and likes it. She wants to bring it home. Poplar Fruit did not know whether to laugh or cry. But how can that be? It's just a supporting role in the movie. Hee hee, you want to raise a dog? No problem. Kiki, after the movie, Anne will buy one for you. You can choose any breed and size you want. Zheng Yujie held Kiki's little hand and said domineeringly, Really? Kiki wants a small motor. Immediately, Kiki's tears turned into laughter. She sniffed and said, Okay, when we go back to Yangcheng, Annie will definitely find one that looks exactly like a small motor for you. Okay, Zheng Yujie asked. Chi-Chi nodded vigorously and wiped away her tears. She was beaming with joy. She had already begun to look forward to the happy days of having little motor. Sister Yujie, Fong Bei Bei anxiously whispered to Zheng Yujie, We already have a big dog at home. How can we raise another one? You don't know, Alaskan Malamutes will grow bigger than gold in the future. It's okay. I'll raise it. Zheng Yujie waved her hand and said indifferently, I'll raise it at home. When Kiki misses it, she'll come see it. After a pause, Zheng Yujie's eyes drifted to Poplar Fruit, then turned back abruptly. The movie theater was very dark, so Fong Bei Bei couldn't see this scene. She faintly sighed and said softly, It's not a bad idea to raise one. It's lonely at home, and it can be a companion. Huh? Sister Yujie, what did you say? Fong Bei Bei didn't hear clearly. Nothing. Zheng Yujie waved her hand and elegantly turned her head. It's settled then. Poplar Fruit shook Fong Bei Bei's hand and said to her with a smile, It's okay. We'll discuss it when we get back. Maybe Kiki's enthusiasm is just a temporary thing. If it really doesn't work, we'll see if there are any suitable ones in your rescue center and adopt one. It's also a contribution. The premiere was always inseparable from some small activities and media Q&A. Director Han Han's connections were quite good. He actually got the support of Director Du from Harbor City in person and also got the VCR blessings from directors Dongsheng and Sui Hark. This could be considered a moderate surprise. But whether the movie was successful or not had nothing to do with how many people supported it. In the end, it still depended on the quality of the movie. The movie began. At the beginning, 3 young people who had lost their hometown were going to leave the island and go on a road journey across the mainland. There were a lot of laughs. At the beginning, there was a scene where they burned down the house to cut off their escape route, but accidentally blew up the house of their childhood sweetheart. The story was a bit ridiculous. Not long after it started, in a hotel, they lost their companion Hu Sheng because of a prostitute and missed the girl, leaving only the 2 of them to continue their journey from east to west. The movie was very complicated, a bit like a mixture of many stories, but in the chaos, there seemed to be a line that connected them. Cities, small towns, mountains, jungles, and even deserts. They kept meeting and saying goodbye to each other as they continued this complicated journey. What kind of profound thought was Han Han trying to express? Poplar Fruit was watching and thinking, but not long after, he decided not to waste his time thinking. Instead, like Fong Bei Bei, he followed the story's development and the movie's burden from time to time to cry and laugh. Feng Xiaofeng and Chun Bolin's performances were very outstanding. They portrayed the maverick but failed strong man and the kind and pure but decadent Wenqing Jianghe. The other supporting roles in this movie couldn't leave such a deep impression on the audience. Let's not talk about the guest roles. Baiku and Teacher Kong's roles were more high-end side characters, so they were limited by their acting skills. They only had a few minutes of screen time, so it felt like they only showed their faces, but they did not leave much of an impression. Chen Xiaoan played the role of Zhou Mo, Wang Luodan played the role of Su Mi, and Yuan Quan played the role of Lu Yingying. These three female characters actually had different personalities, but they all had an indescribable charm and were memorable in their sadness. However, they were ultimately just supporting roles that passed by and missed out on, and they had too little screen time. Only Che and Juan's Alu was the only shining point other than the two main characters. Alu was a man like a mystery, a knight who rode a motorcycle around the world. He was a man who was deeply in love with his wife. He was a man with an ideal like Voyager 1. Alu deceived the main characters and even the audience. But just as everyone was moved by his deeds, he suddenly stole the strong man's car and made a big reversal. However, even with this big turn of events, everyone was still unsure about the answer to one question. Was what Alu said about his wife and the pursuit of Voyager 1 true? From another point of view, wasn't Che and Juan's performance also vivid? 2 hours later, the movie came to an end with Pu Shu's faint sad voice. The song Ordinary Road was very appropriate. Although it had been announced on the internet a few days ago, it still made people sigh at the end of the movie. Fong Beibei's tear ducts were shallow. When she saw the ending, she had already shed tears, so Poplar Fruit was taking care of her instead of standing up and applauding. Poplar Fruit knew why she was so sad. But when you say goodbye to someone, you still have to use a little strength. Because if you say one more sentence, it might be your last sentence. If you look at them one more time, it might be your last time. This sentence was not necessarily used between friends. It could also be used for love. Silly. Poplar Fruit hugged Fong Beibei's body and let her lean on his chest. Then he held her hand and said, "We will be together forever. We will never say goodbye." After the movie ended, Poplar Fruit congratulated Che and Juan and left with his girlfriend and child, because the main characters here were Han Han and Che and Juan. However, there's a little girl who is still thinking about little Motor. Motor is very cute. Kiki likes its compact facial features. Well, it can play dead. Ha! Gold doesn't even know how to play. Chi-Chi, did you notice that Motor has grown bigger? He's so fat and big now. When it grows up, you won't think it's cute anymore. No, Motor is very cute when it grows up. It's as cute as a panda. If you like Motor, then Gold will be very sad. No way, no way. Kiki also likes Gold very much. Kiki likes Gold and Motor at the same time. Moreover, if Gold has Motor as its friend, it will be very happy. Just like Kiki has little sister Xiao Qi and brother Xiao Feng. The night wind in the capital was a little cold. It blew the little girl's light voice, which floated far in the air. Chapter 11:11. Kiki wanted to raise an Alaskan Malamute like Little Motor, and Zheng Yujie helped her fulfill her wish. However, the Alaskan Malamute that was fostered in Zheng Yujie's house could no longer be called Little Motor. It was an adult Big Motor. Because it grew too big, it was abandoned by its owner like many other pets. Big Motor was rescued by the rescue center at the end of last year from a landfill station. At that time, it had lost all of its fur and was as skinny as firewood. It was not even as heavy as an adult Chinese field dog, and it even had a very ugly skin disease. That was the first time the rescue center had seen an Alaskan Malamute, and they had always registered it as a husky. In fact, adult Alaskan Malamutes did indeed look like huskies. It was only when Fong Beibei took over the rescue center and arranged for the professional veterinarians at the pet hospital to categorize all of the stray cats and dogs for management that the veterinarians gave it a proper name. After 3 months of treatment and care at the rescue center, Big Motor returned to its normal size. However, a large adult dog like Big Motor had a terrifying appetite. If Fong Beibei hadn't taken over the rescue center and had sufficient funds to back it up, according to the standards of the previous rescue centers, Big Motor probably wouldn't have been able to eat until it was half full, and it wouldn't have looked as beautiful as it did now. Regardless, after returning to Yangcheng, after everyone discussed it, they went to Fong Beibei's pet hospital to look for information and found the only Alaskan Malamute in the rescue center. Kiki liked Big Motor at first sight and didn't mention anything about raising Little Motor. Therefore, Zheng Yujie became the first customer of the pet hospital to adopt a stray dog since the establishment of the pet hospital. Yes, because they didn't understand, too many people had a serious prejudice against stray cats and dogs. They felt that stray cats and dogs carried germs, and they were more willing to pay for healthy pets. Isn't that simple? Zheng Yujie gave a few suggestions. First, find someone to write a few articles, mainly to highlight the health of the stray cats and dogs after the treatment at the rescue center and the kindness of the people who adopted them. Then, spread it on Weibo and WeChat, and everyone will understand after reading it. Zheng Yujie said that there were still experts in writing articles in the publishing company, and she could ask for help if she needed anything. Second, isn't the purpose of your pet hospital to do better public welfare? Zheng Yujie said, if that's the case, then do it more thoroughly. You could do a free physical examination for the adopted stray cats and dogs and cats, and even waive the medical fees. Her suggestion finally helped Fong Beibei draw the final blueprint of the pet hospital. Then the website's website, and Fong Beibei. Not only to categorize the stray cats and dogs, but also allow people to click on clicks to know more about the status of the stray cats and dogs and cats to pet to be, not only to categorize the categories, but also in clicks, so to make it so that people could click on click ants. And, if possible, they could further develop a WeChat public account to make it smarter and more convenient for the target customers to find the pets they wanted to adopt. Zheng Yujie's suggestion was very good. After her analysis, Fong Beibei quickly found a breakthrough between the pet hospital and the rescue center. Especially the articles, because Fong Beibei used real photos and cases. Once published, it touched countless netizens and was forwarded tens of millions of times, thanks to some internet celebrities. And the last sentence, if you love, please love deeply. If you raise, please adopt. Fong Beibei mainly urged people to cherish their pets and not abandon them. It improved the situation of pet abandonment from the source, and to a certain extent, strengthened the hearts of many families who wanted to adopt pets. Although adoption was not so popular that the demand could not meet the demand, Fong Beibei's public welfare project was finally on the right track. More and more poor dogs would find families who would care for them until they were old. Of course, this was all in the future. Zheng Yujie adopted Big Motor home. Although it was mainly for Kiki, Big Motor still made a lot of changes in her life. In the past, she would devote most of her time to work, and her personal space would be severely compressed because of the major events and chores of the publishing house. With Big Motor, Zheng Yujie's work schedule became more regular. Except for some meetings and busy projects that couldn't be changed, she handed over all the trivial matters in the publishing house to her assistant. Every day, she would make time to walk Big Motor. Alaskan Malamute was a docile dog that did not like to bark very much. Compared to the husky that looked very similar to it, it was more honest and steady, while the latter was super neurotic. Its personality is very similar to yours. It cares about its family, is considerate, and doesn't bark. When you are tired, you can even lean on it. One day, Poplar Fruit came to see Big Motor with Kiki. Zheng Yujie sat on the side and chatted with Poplar Fruit. She spoke softly like an artistic youth reading poetry. On the other side, Kiki was happily rolling around on Big Motor. Compared to Kiki, who liked to play with gold, Big Motor was like an older brother than Kiki. It turned its head and looked at her meekly, letting Kiki use it as a sofa. Poplar Fruit knew that Zheng Yujie's words had a hidden meaning, but he could only smile bitterly. This is also good. When I come home, I have a companion. When I miss you, I can look at Big Motor. I am satisfied. Zheng Yujie continued to say. Looking at Big Motor's eyes, what was reflected was Poplar Fruit's figure. I'm not a dog. Poplar Fruit scratched his head. You are worse than a dog. Zheng Yujie softly snorted and said with sarcasm, do you think I really don't care in front of you? I miss you so much that I want you to come out and accompany me, but you refuse to come out. Fortunately, there is Big Motor. When I hide in the quilt and cry, it knows to come over and pat my shoulder. Poplar fruit was silent. He also felt uncomfortable listening to it. But, as he said before, love is never fair, and it is impossible to divide it into two halves. If you choose one, you are bound to hurt the other. Fortunately, Zheng Yujie only complained intermittently. After a while, she changed the topic and asked Poplar Fruit to cook a meal for her. You didn't buy any vegetables? Poplar Fruit wanted to say, why don't we go out to eat? There are some in the fridge. I asked the nanny to buy them. Zheng Yujie pouted her lips, hinting him. But I still have to go home to eat later. Poplar Fruit scratched his head. It's okay. I just want you to watch me finish eating before you leave. Zheng Yujie said in a firm tone. Poplar Fruit looked at Kiki, who was still playing with Big Motor, and had no intention of going home. Thinking about the guilt in his heart, he stood up and walked to the kitchen. Zheng Yujie also stood up, but did not go in. She just leaned against the door and looked at him. Poplar Fruit composed himself and began to think about what kind of beautiful and delicious dishes to make for Zheng Yujie. Consider it as making up for it. Poplar Fruit thought, why does it feel like something is wrong? Forget it, if something is wrong, then something is wrong. It's not an excessive request, right? Chapter 11-12. In the middle of August, Poplar Fruit's cooperation with the student union representatives from various universities came to an end. There was still half a month before school started. Poplar Fruit welcomed a rare short holiday. If it was according to the previous arrangements, Poplar Fruit would take Kiki on a trip during the summer vacation. However, it seemed that there was no time now. Plus, he had not been home for half a year. His parents were always saying that they missed their granddaughter. Therefore, Poplar Fruit decided to take Kiki back to his hometown. Fong Bei did not participate in any competitions this year. Therefore, she had plenty of time and would go back with them. Speaking of which, time flies. In the blink of an eye, Fong Bei was almost in her 4th year of university. When Poplar Fruit first met her, Fong Bei was not in university yet. Their love had already lasted for 2 years. Many students who were about to enter their 4th year of university would have to face life choices again. For example, Poplar Fruit was busy applying for jobs for the whole year. Every day, he would be as tired as a dog when he came back. He would look at the empty 3-party agreement and feel anxious. However, Fong Bei did not need to go through such a difficult journey. She had won 2 special prizes in the American Mathematical Modeling Competition and participated in the research projects of academicians. Such qualifications were enough to guarantee that Fong Bei would be qualified for postgraduate studies. Moreover, if Fong Bei was willing to spend some time tutoring in English, she could even get into a famous foreign university. At the very least, the 2 best universities in Beijing would be willing to give her a place in postgraduate studies. However, Fong Bei and Poplar Fruit were the same. They both chose to stay in their alma mater and stayed in Guangdong province. Maybe I can have a better development in other schools. But didn't you say that? As long as it's real gold, it will shine when we put it there. Fong Bei told Poplar Fruit when she made the decision. Last year, around this time, Poplar Fruit and Li Zichao had an ultimate competition. As a result, he saved the innocent Duan Xueqing, and the man who loved the Duan Xueqing wrongly, Pai Dinwan, risked his own life to kill Li Zichao. It was also because of that incident that Poplar Fruit's life returned to normal. He no longer needed to be on guard against any schemes that popped up out of nowhere. Of course, the Li family would not let this matter rest. It was Zheng Mingsheng and He Jioming who bore the brunt of the Li family's anger. Perhaps if Li Zichao had not appeared, Duan Xueqing would not have become a little crazy because of Pai Dinwan's death. Although she was not really sick, Poplar Fruit had visited her and she still had not recovered from that incident. However, if Li Zichao had not been there, would Pai Dinwan have appeared? Perhaps he would. If they were destined to be tied together in this life, even if there had not been that accident, perhaps they would have met on the street. The man was high, the woman was indifferent, but the man would continue to chase after her. Perhaps because of a cup of hot tea, the iceberg would melt. Without Li Zichao, there would not have been the first and second periods of pain. Duan Xueqing would be happier, right? Poplar Fruit stood by the window and held his phone for a long time, but he still did not make the call. He suddenly understood that Duan Xueqing would not care about the news. She would not be happy or sad because of the Li family. She probably only cared about one person in her heart, a person who would not come back. Although he was moved by the relationship between Duan Xueqing and Pai Din Wan, Poplar Fruit really hoped that Duan Xueqing could let go of the past and welcome a new relationship. This might be difficult, but Poplar Fruit hoped that in the future he would see after the sadness. Poplar Fruit suddenly received a call from Beijing. It was not a bad thing, nor was it a happy event. It was a happy event that really made Poplar Fruit cheer. The call was from Professor Yuan Xinlin from Beijing University. After only 2 months, Poplar Fruit's completely perfected word-splitting method passed the clinical test of the Education Department and the Confucius Institute. Whether it was new primary school children or new foreign students recruited by the Confucius Institute, the word-splitting method greatly reduced the difficulty of Chinese education. These tests were not easy. The country had invested a lot of money in them. That was why the results were out in 2 months. There were more than 3,000 foreigners in more than 30 countries around the world who participated in the test. After 2 months of Chinese learning, more than 2,100 foreigners passed the HSK Level 3 exam. The HSK was also called the Chinese Proficiency Test. Those who passed the Level 3 exam could basically complete daily conversations in Chinese. They could even deal with most of the people who came to China to travel. Compared to the past, the HSK Level 3 exam was for examinees who had taken Chinese classes for a year and a half, 2 to 3 classes a week. However, more than 2,000 students who passed the Level 3 exam only took 2 months. Professor Yuan Xinlin told Poplar Fruit that although the results were not unexpected, the comments of the examinees such as, "It's so easy," "I'm in love with Chinese," "I'll continue to study in the future," etc., still made the Chinese research team's professors ecstatic. Poplar Fruit, are you ready? Professor Yuan Xinlin asked with a smile. Ready for what? Poplar Fruit asked curiously. Professor Yuan Xinlin did not answer this question directly. Instead, he said, in September, 475 Confucius Institutes and 851 Confucius classrooms around the world will undergo a comprehensive reform. All teaching materials will be replaced with teaching materials based on the theory of the word-splitting method. Poplar Fruit, are you mentally prepared for the word-splitting method you invented to be tested by people all over the world? Professor Yuan Xinlin asked seriously. Poplar Fruit's expression turned serious. He said seriously, "I'm ready. Success, that is the success of the Chinese nation. Failure, or lack thereof, I will work harder to improve." Perhaps the Chinese language would also be able to say goodbye to the past and usher in a new future. Chapter 11:13. What are you looking at? Kiki. Fong Beibei leaned over and looked at the scenery outside the window with Kiki. There were fields with all kinds of fruits and vegetables in the southern land. In the distance, there were short but green mountains. The trees that protected the road flashed in front of their eyes. It was like a movie showing the beautiful scenery of nature and the mountain village in front of them. Kiki misses Grandpa and Grandma. Kiki said in a melancholy voice, and brother Jie and Fu. Since Poplar Fruit said that he would take her home, Kiki's homesickness surged. No one knew why her little head was filled with the sadness that only adults would have. "Are we going home to visit them now?" Fong Beibei helped Kiki tidy up her messy long hair and said gently to her, "In a while, we will go back to our hometown and see Grandpa and Grandma. Mama, do you think Fu will welcome Goldie home?" Kiki turned her head and asked. Goldie, who was lying on its stomach in the third row, raised its head and looked at its little master in confusion. It was very happy when it got in the car, because it hadn't traveled with its masters for a long time. It wriggled excitedly for a few hours and only took a break now. "Of course," Fong Beibei said with a smile. "Goldie and Fu are as kind as Kiki. They will definitely like each other. How can they not welcome each other?" At this time, Poplar Fruit, who was concentrating on driving, said, "We are almost at the county town." "Really?" Kiki's mood suddenly rose. She turned her head and looked out of the window with her big, shining eyes. The Land Rover passed the toll station, and Poplar Fruit began to drive off the highway to the county town. After making a turn in the county town, they could turn into the county road back to the village. What is this? Poplar Fruit was dumbfounded as he looked at the newly built cultural square in front of him. There was a large group of people standing there. Most of them were onlookers, but there were some officials in suits standing in front of them. More importantly, they were holding large banners. It said, "Welcome back to your hometown, Poplar Fruit, the hero of the people." What the hell was he doing? Poplar Fruit almost drove the car into an electric pole. He stopped the car and looked outside with a frown. Then, he told Fong Bei and the others to stay in the car. He opened the door and got out. Poplar Fruit can't refuse. The leader of the party is Yang Rong, and there are a lot of leaders behind him. Poplar Fruit must respect them. She didn't know how they found out about her return. Perhaps it was her family who spread the news. However, it seemed that her family was kept in the dark. Otherwise, her sister and brother-in-law would have told her about it. Welcome, Poplar Fruit. I'm looking forward to seeing your hometown." Yang Rong came over with a smile and said to Poplar Fruit. He took a bouquet of flowers from a primary school student next to him and handed it to Poplar Fruit. Immediately, a lot of people who looked like reporters ran over and took photos of them with their cameras. "Secretary Yang, what are you doing?" Poplar Fruit frowned and shook his head. He asked with a wry smile, "I'm not a big shot. Why are you making such a big scene?" "Of course, I have to welcome you grandly." Yang Rong didn't seem to hear the dissatisfaction in Poplar Fruit's words. He laughed and said, "You don't know how proud we are of you after you become the hero of the people." Poplar Fruit looked around. However, there was no pride or joy like Yang Rong said. It was just the behavior of the group of officials in front of him. The onlookers were more curious and confused. It had been 5 months since Kuan Ming's incident in March. It was enough for his name to fade from people's memories. This was also the reason why Poplar Fruit had been keeping a low profile. The media rarely mentioned him. But why did Yang Rong make such a big scene? Poplar Fruit seemed to have understood something. He wanted to talk to his family about the changes in his hometown. Yang Rong told Poplar Fruit that his hometown hadn't changed much. Yang Rong's new road not only didn't become a dragon that drove the county's economy to take off, but was gradually abandoned because not many businesses moved in. He built the county's cultural square to completely change the appearance of the county and attract more tourists. However, he didn't succeed. Instead, it became a good place for aunties to do square dancing at night. However, Yang Rong saw it one day and arranged for the police and urban management to drive the aunties out. He said that it would affect the city's appearance and made the people complain. Yang Rong had been in charge of the county for more than a year. He had been anxious to make political achievements, but his political ideas were not practical. He tried to use real estate and tourism as a breakthrough. Unfortunately, the spending power of the county was limited. Most people couldn't afford and didn't need to buy more houses for investment. Therefore, most of the county's financial expenses were thrown into the water. They didn't really implement it and didn't really benefit the people. Not only in the county, but also in the higher-ups' doubts about Yang Rong gradually increased. Yang Rong's state of mind became more and more anxious. The more anxious he was, the more impatient he was to do some practical things honestly. Instead, he was thinking all day long about finding another way to do something evil. Now, there was something wrapped in a red cloth in the middle of the square. It was surrounded by lanterns and decorations, making it very conspicuous. All of this made Poplar Fruit feel a little uneasy. Poplar Fruit, you also see this, right?" Yang Rong stepped forward and affectionately held Yang Guo's hand. Without any explanation, he led him to the other side, showing that they were good brothers. However, Yang Guo's brows were tightly knitted. He could only helplessly follow along. Several cameras of the county's television station had been filming from all directions. They even made some movements to record the program. Today, our people's hero returns to his hometown. It is also the day of the completion of our county's first people's hero sculpture. It is a joyous day for the people of our county. A stage was set up in front of the big red cloth. A host was standing on it and speaking loudly. "Wait, Poplar Fruit stopped. He didn't want to go on the stage again. He looked at Yang Rong angrily. Secretary Yang, what are you doing? Poplar Fruit, how can you say this is a joke? Yang Rong laughed and said, this is your hometown's recognition of your contributions. Poplar Fruit's face darkened. He looked at the large stone tablet in front of the red cloth. It was engraved with his battle record of stopping 8 terrorist thugs at Kunming train station. It was obvious what the 2-story tall sculpture covered by the red cloth behind it was. Secretary Yang, I'm sorry. Please forgive me for not recognizing your approach. Poplar Fruit finally couldn't help but shake off Yang Rong's hand. He said loudly, I don't think I've done anything worthy of my hometown's people to build a sculpture for me. And I believe that this sculpture doesn't represent the wishes of my hometown's people. What you're doing is a waste of money and manpower. Yang Guo shouted these words in a powerful and resonant voice. Then, under the dumbfounded gaze of the group of officials, he turned around and left. Poplar Fruit drove away, leaving behind a gloomy Yang Rong. The reporters in the television station looked at each other in dismay. He left behind a crowd that was laughing and even cheering loudly. He left behind the red cloth that was so bright that it made people feel that it was ironic. Chapter 11:14. Poplar Fruit left Yang Rong, the county head, in the cultural square under the watchful eyes of the public. As for what happened after that, Poplar Fruit did not know. He had already brought Fong Beibei and Kiki home. Returning to her hometown, Kiki was naturally overjoyed. As soon as she got out of the car, her pleasant cries of Grandpa and Grandma spread throughout the courtyard. Kiki, who had a sweet mouth, made the wrinkles on Yang Tai and Su Jinfeng's faces bloom. In the past 2 years, the family was willing to spend money. After many renovations, the courtyard was not as dirty as the other houses in the village. Instead, it was orderly and tidy like a small garden. As soon as Gold got out of the car, a few chubby yellow puppies came out of the small garden. They dared to surround it and even barked, as if they had learned to protect their home since they were young. Woof! Fu, who had already become a dog mother, rushed back from Poplar Fruit's side and stared at the uninvited guest, Gold. However, Gold was very friendly. It walked around with Fu, and the 2 dogs sniffed each other's scent. Fu, Gold, you 2 have to be good friends, Kiki said without raising her head. She broke free from her grandparents' side and happily pounced on the 3 puppies. She was in a really good mood. They were born at the beginning of this month. Yang Tai explained to Poplar Fruit with a smile. I gave birth to 5. I gave one to the 3rd uncle in the village, and the kid next door also took one away because he liked it. Poplar Fruit smiled, but he was still worried in his heart. Looking at this, could it be that he wants to take 2 more home? Kiki was temporarily put aside. Not long after Poplar Fruit came back, Yang Chengwan arrived with Yang Ping and Yang Linjie in his car. This summer vacation, the family's factory had selected the best employees and sent them to Nanhu province for a holiday at the company's expense. Yang Chengwan had just returned not long ago. These days, Yang Linjie had been playing with his grandparents. Haha, Poplar Fruit, I heard that you embarrassed Yang Rong at the square. Yang Chengwan asked happily. Brother-in-law, you know. Poplar Fruit looked up at him and asked. Speaking of this, Poplar Fruit was unhappy. Of course I know. How big is our county town? My friend will call me right away. Yang Chengwan laughed. Poplar Fruit frowned and asked, so you knew about this statue from the beginning? Yang Chengwan waved his hand and said, no, I don't know. Why wouldn't I tell you if I knew? Su Jinfeng and Fong Beibei came over. After she understood what Poplar Fruit and the others were discussing, she raised her eyebrows and snorted. I was wondering what was going on. So it was about the statue. Last month, someone came to me to discuss this matter and said that he wanted me to pay for it. Ah, Mom, you knew about this? Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. Then you paid for it. Why didn't you discuss it with me? Why would I pay for it? Su Jinfeng said angrily. You silly child. Why don't you think about it? He's not dead yet. Why would he put up a statue? I scolded the person who came. Yang Chengwan nodded thoughtfully and said, then he might have asked other entrepreneurs in the county to sponsor the money. In my opinion, brother, you were too reckless. He's an official. You shouldn't have attacked him in public. Regarding this matter, Yang Ping had a different opinion. She said worriedly, "Sister." Fang Beibei came over and held Yang Ping's hand. She said in Mandarin, Poplar Fruit didn't do anything wrong. If he didn't choose to refuse, there might be more people scolding him on the internet. Because she was determined to learn Poplar Fruit's dialect. Although Fang Beibei still couldn't speak it well, there was no problem with her hearing. Poplar Fruit's wife is right. Yang Chengwan laughed and pointed at Yang Ping. You're too narrow-minded. With our family's Poplar Fruit status, do we still need to accommodate a small county official? Our brother has seen the country's leaders before. It's not because I'm not afraid of him. It's because I'm reasonable in this matter. Poplar Fruit shook his head and said slowly, what is Yang Rong planning? He just wants to hype up my matter in exchange for political achievements. If he wants me to help promote my hometown and bring tangible benefits to the people in my hometown, I'm still willing. But he doesn't. First of all, whether it's financial or entrepreneurial money, he's wasting the people's money by erecting this statue. Then you might not know, but the cultural square is so small. As a result, a statue of me is erected there. It's not convenient for any activities to be held in the cultural square in the future. Isn't this harming the people's interests? Poplar Fruit said, yes, erecting a statue of me sounds like a great move. In the future, all the tourists who come to or pass by our county will know my name, Poplar Fruit. But is this going to be immortalized forever? Poplar Fruit asked. No, I'm afraid it'll only be infamy. Poplar Fruit laughed. Because I become an accomplice in Yang Rong's project to build political achievements. Fang Beibei nodded and said, yes, we can't accept it. On this issue, Fang Beibei stood closely with Poplar Fruit. But, brother, he's the secretary of the county. Yang Ping muttered worriedly. Although Yang Rong was unpopular in the county, he was still the head of the county. He had jurisdiction over the entire county, including all the Yang family's businesses. Poplar Fruit and Yang Rong had a bad relationship. The first thing that would be affected was the operation of their family's business and factory. As long as Yang Rong gave a few administrative orders to stop work for safety rectification, their business would be in trouble. Yang Chengwan said, what's there to be afraid of? Poplar Fruit has met the number one leader. You tell the number one leader to let the Commission for Discipline Inspection investigate Yang Rong. I guarantee that he'll be in trouble. Poplar Fruit, let me tell you, Yang Rong's ass is definitely not clean. Who knows how much money he embezzled to build roads and plazas? You're stupid. Do you think the number one leader is someone you can meet whenever you want? Yang Ping slapped Yang Chengwan and said, he's so busy every day. How would he have the time to deal with the trivial matters of us commoners? If only Secretary Chun was in the city. Yang Ping sighed and said, Secretary Chun definitely wouldn't let Yang Rong do whatever he wanted. Why did she mention Qianlongjiang? Qianlongjiang was already a thing of the past. He was doing well in Guishan province, but he couldn't come back and intervene in Guangdong province's political affairs. All right, don't you still have me? I've been in Yangchang for so many years. It's not like I don't know a few people. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, we'll deal with it when the time comes. If we really go against Yang Rong, I'm not necessarily afraid of him. Besides, even if the business is gone, it's not like I don't have money to support you. With money, we can still make a comeback, right? Poplar Fruit said with a smile. I forgot that you're already a billionaire. Yang Ping laughed. Chapter 11:15. If nothing happened to Yang Rong, Poplar Fruit wouldn't want to make things difficult for a county party secretary. Although he knew a lot of powerful people, not to mention Zheng Yuji's father, Zheng Mingsheng, and not to mention the promise that the number one leader had made him back then, he could casually hire a department-level cadre like Uncle Gene. One word from him would be enough to make Yang Rong suffer. However, Poplar Fruit didn't like to cause trouble. If people didn't offend him, he wouldn't offend them. He would just be an ordinary person who worked hard for his academic career. However, he still underestimated Yang Rong's shamelessness. In the evening, the family happily finished dinner and chatted in the living room. The news of Yang Rong unveiling the statue in the square was broadcasted on TV. Poplar Fruit completely lost interest in chatting. Yang Rong was so thick-skinned. Poplar Fruit had already turned against him and left, but he still wanted to continue the event. But thinking about it, it made sense. He had spent millions on a statue. If it didn't continue, he couldn't drag the statue back to his home, right? What shocked Poplar Fruit's family was that Yang Rong even asked the TV station to edit the video. They spliced the video of Poplar Fruit getting out of the car to pick up the flowers and being led to the statue, and Yang Rong pulling down the red cloth under the guidance of the host. The video of Poplar Fruit leaving angrily and Yang Rong's gloomy face under the crowd's jeering disappeared. Instead, because of this splicing, it seemed that Poplar Fruit had participated in and supported the completion of the statue. Wasn't Yang Rong afraid that someone would take a video and upload it to the internet to expose him? Oh, Yang Rong asked the police to force everyone to delete the video on the spot. What a clever move. In an instant, he pulled Poplar Fruit to the front and made Poplar Fruit face all the doubts of public opinion. It wasn't over yet. Poplar Fruit could still sit still when he saw the news of the statue unveiling. But when he saw the video quoted below, Poplar Fruit jumped out of his seat. It's not a coincidence that Mr. Yang Hua became a superhero in the hearts of the people. In his hometown, Mr. Yang Hua has always been kind and willing to help others. In November 2011, there was a robbery at XX Bank by masked robbers armed with guns. Coincidentally, Mr. Yang Hua, who was there at the time, fought with his bare hands against 3 masked robbers armed with guns to protect the safety of the people's property. How dare he bring this up? Poplar Fruit was shocked and furious. From a surveillance footage, we can see that the gun-wielding masked robber injured a civilian and attempted to rape and injure a female student at the scene. It was Yang Hua and an active-duty military officer who acted together. Poplar Fruit couldn't stand it anymore. He went up and turned off the TV. Kiki and Yang Lingjie had already eaten and gone outside to play, not because they were worried that the children would see it. So that's how it is. I was wondering why Yang Rong dared to continue to put up this statue. It turns out that he found a previous case to back up his actions. Yang Chengwan sighed. With this surveillance video, I'm afraid that others won't pursue him for a while. Yang Rong did think so. Wasn't the news of Poplar Fruit's superhero no longer new? He would add fuel to the fire and let people see even more explosive evidence. Robbers with guns. Poplar Fruit dared to fight with them just to save a female student. Such a heroic incident would probably only be seen in American blockbusters, right? But it really happened around us. Yang Rong wanted the national media to hype up Poplar Fruit's heroic performance again. He wanted everyone to recognize Poplar Fruit's title as a hero. Then, not only would his act of erecting a statue for Poplar Fruit not be questioned, but it would also earn him more attention and fame. In order to thank Poplar Fruit for his contributions, the people of his hometown naturally erected a small statue for him. What's wrong with that? And our county is the cradle of superheroes. Think about Batman's Gotham City. If this news were to spread, wouldn't many fans of Poplar Fruit from all over the country come to pay homage to the statue of Poplar Fruit, the superhero? Yang Rong really had a good plan. It turned out that this surveillance video was his trump card. What do you know? Poplar Fruit roared at Yang Chengwan, who was amazed by this method. It was the first time he was so angry. Why did Secretary Chun, me, and Big Brother he suppress this case? Do you know? Poplar Fruit's anger shocked everyone. Fong Bei quickly went up and hugged Poplar Fruit's arm. Only then did she calm down the raging Poplar Fruit and drag him back to his seat. Let's talk nicely. Don't fight. Su Jinfeng, who was taking care of her grandchildren in the courtyard, heard the commotion and came back to say. Yang Ping waved her hand and told her that it was nothing. They didn't want the old lady to worry. Because of Fong Bei's soft persuasion, Poplar Fruit's emotions calmed down a little. He said in a low voice, "Sorry, I shouldn't be angry at you. It's okay. Your question just now, wasn't it because my daughter is Secretary Chen's daughter?" Yang Chengwan asked in confusion. Poplar Fruit shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "No, if it was only because of this, there was no need to suppress the case and hide it. Wouldn't it be fine if the news didn't report the girl's situation? In fact, this case didn't go through our county's police. It was directly taken over by the provincial department. Poplar Fruit asked, "Do you know why?" "Why? Was it armed robbery?" Fong Beibei asked. She hadn't heard Poplar Fruit talk about this in detail. She only knew that Poplar Fruit had saved Chun Longjiang's daughter, so the two families had a close relationship. She only knew about the dangerous situation of armed robbers after watching the news. It was because this group of people had done several major cases of drug trafficking and murder across the border. They had dozens of lives in their hands, including the police. The robbery in our county was their last resort before they escaped, Poplar Fruit said solemnly. He had always known about it, but he didn't say it because he didn't want his family to worry. None of the 3 robbers who came in at that time ran away. 1 was dead and 2 were injured. Of course, the injured one was later sentenced to death and shot. Poplar Fruit didn't say it out loud, but he said, later on, the investigation found that there was another robber outside. Until now, we still haven't caught him. Poplar Fruit said solemnly. There's information that shows that he has secretly escaped to a foreign country. At that time, I remember that they were speaking Thai, but the police and the Thai police couldn't find him. It's very likely that he has changed his name and is hiding somewhere. I understand now. Back then, this case was covered up to protect us. Yang Chongwan had been in the army, so his reaction was faster. He immediately said, "I'm worried that the person who escaped will come back for revenge." Poplar Fruit was silent for a while, then nodded solemnly. Chapter 11:16. In his hometown, Poplar Fruit had been on tenterhooks for half a month. However, on the surface, it seemed to be peaceful, and he did not encounter any of his old enemies. Even before leaving his hometown, Poplar Fruit drove around the county, and even with his sensitive sixth sense, he did not feel any danger. Perhaps it was a false alarm? After 3 years, those gangsters had probably forgotten their old hatred. Perhaps they had already been captured by foreign warlords and killed in the mountains. Therefore, after the bodyguard arrived, Poplar Fruit said goodbye to his parents and left his hometown with Fong Beibei and Kiki. Yang Rong, who probably did not know who he had offended until his death, received the punishment he deserved. He had embezzled more than 10 million yuan, which was enough for him to spend the rest of his life in prison. Poplar Fruit did not add insult to injury. In his eyes, Yang Rong was not an enemy. He was just a rat shit that ruined a pot of porridge. He did not need to spend any more effort to get rid of him. The night before returning home, Kiki was reluctant to part with Afu's puppies. She could not sleep the whole night and kept talking to Poplar Fruit about bringing the puppies home. They could no longer keep pets at home. If they asked, Fong Beibei still had a pet hospital as their base. Wouldn't Kiki have to bring the cats and puppies home every day? In the end, Fong Beibei carried Kiki outside to look at the stars and talk to her. Fong Beibei knew that Poplar Fruit was nervous these days, so he did not have the patience to persuade Kiki. "Kiki, why do you want to bring Huang and the puppies home so much?" Fong Beibei asked gently. Because Huang is super cute. Kiki likes Huang, and Huang also likes to play with Kiki. Kiki pouted, playing with her fingers, and said unhappily. Poplar Fruit's tough attitude just now made Kiki feel very uncomfortable. But Goldie is still young. Fong Beibei thought for a moment and said, "They're still young and don't know how to live independently. It's hard for us to take care of them. Even Gold is small." Kiki pouted. She was not so easily fooled. She said, "In the past, Goldie grew up with Kiki. Kiki has seen Papa's photo. He's as big as little Huang." Fong Beibei said, "But, Chi-Chi, have you thought about it? Little Huang and the others are still so young. If we let them leave Fu and their mother, and then they can't see each other for a long time, won't little Huang be very sad?" Kiki was stunned. She raised her head and looked at Fong Beibei with her big eyes. Her eyes reflected the bright stars in the sky. There's also Afu. Her child has been taken away, leaving her all alone. Will she be upset? Will she look very pitiful? Fong Beibei asked softly. She held Kiki's little face and gently stroked it. "Don't say any more." Kiki's eyes gradually became misty, and then she said with tears in her eyes, Kiki doesn't want to bring Huang 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 home because Kiki doesn't want Huang 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 and Ah Fu to be sad. In the end, the little fellow was still kind-hearted. The more she thought about it, the more uncomfortable she felt. Her eyebrows furrowed and golden beads rolled in her eyes. Kiki is a good child, so sensible. Fong Bei held Kiki's smiling face and kissed it lovingly. Don't cry, don't cry. Kiki also thought of herself. The little girl couldn't help but cry. She said tearfully, Kiki didn't have a mama ma when she was young. Other children have a mama ma. Kiki doesn't want Huang 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 to be as sad as Kiki. Kiki didn't cry in the past because Kiki had a good father who was both a father and a mother. Kiki didn't make a fuss in the past because when she really realized this problem, Fong Bei had already filled this gap in her life. Kiki didn't express it in the past, but in fact, Kiki had always understood. Fong Bei was a little shocked, and her eyes were a little red. She hugged Kiki and said with heartache, Yes, don't you have a mother now? Mom has already promised your mother that she will love you well. Every time they came back, Poplar Fruit would take Kiki to pay respects to Kiki's birth mother, Wu Yu. He didn't ask Fong Bei to go with them, but Fong Bei asked to go every time. Fong Bei liked Kiki and treated Kiki as her own. She had said this to Kiki before, and she had also promised to the tombstone at the bottom of the hill. Kiki knows. Kiki held Fong Bei's soft hand and rubbed it with satisfaction. Her mood was like the autumn night sky of the southern kingdom, comfortable and bright. The next day, although there was still some reluctance, Poplar Fruit promised to bring Kiki home to see Huang Huang during the new year, and Grandpa and Grandma also promised not to give the 3 Huang Huang to others, so Kiki obediently went home with her father. After returning home, the first thing Yangwu did was to hide the Type 92 holster on her belt in the top compartment of the wardrobe. She used clothes that she rarely wore to cover it. He couldn't let Kiki see it, and he also couldn't let Kiki reach it. This thing was not a toy, and there was a danger of an adult holding it. Fong Bei and Lin Xingshan took Kiki to buy a small bag and beautiful clothes for kindergarten. Poplar Fruit didn't follow. He started to get busy. The main thing was that in the coming new semester, Poplar Fruit needed to give a speech, and a lot of speeches. After 2 months of intensive work, Fat Dragon and Kai Simin led the original company's employees and local staff and worked themselves to death. Finally, in 3 provinces, thousands of poor mountainous areas and millions of poor children were set up. Was this a lot of people? A lot. But compared to the national shortfall of nearly 500 million poor children, a few million really wasn't a lot. The country invested more than $1 billion in poverty alleviation funds and more than 100,000 government workers, but compared to the scale of a few decades ago, it was still too little. However, from this, one could see the country's determination. In the past 2 months, how many times had the remote teaching been on the news? In the past 2 months, how many television interview programs had discussed the model of remote teaching? How many media outlets had participated in the mobilization of university volunteers? Indeed, just like what Poplar Fruit and the country had discussed, the country was only using remote teaching as a transition. In the future, it would gradually transition to teachers hired by the country to teach, university volunteers to enrich the teaching content and the children's lives during the holidays. It was a bit far-fetched, and it would take more than a year to set up this stall. Not to mention that this transition would take 10 years as a unit to gradually popularize the reform. Poplar Fruit was now the main force in mobilizing university volunteers. The speech schedule had already been arranged. In the coming semester, he needed to give 100 speeches in universities across the country. Sometimes it was even possible to give 2 speeches a day. The number of speeches, the intensity, and it exceeded Poplar Fruit's previous experience. He needed to be well prepared. Chapter 11:17. The physical and psychological aspects were still okay, but the most important thing was to prepare the speech. Charity and remote teaching were big topics. Poplar Fruit had already written a book about it. If he were to stand up and talk, he would not be able to finish it even if he talked for a day and a night. Poplar Fruit used to give speeches at several high schools in Yangcheng. Now that he thought about it, he felt that his speeches were too general. Life, learning, ideals, charity, etc. He talked about everything, but there was no clear central idea. Now it was different. Poplar Fruit had 100 speeches. He needed to fully mobilize the enthusiasm of the students from the 100 high schools and even the students from other high schools to participate in charity. Therefore, the task was important and difficult. Poplar Fruit had to redesign his speech. However, Poplar Fruit was not a master speaker. He had read a lot of books, but he did not have a clear idea of how to design his speech. He had to ask a professional for help. Poplar Fruit thought of Professor Mills, one of the speakers of the TED conference, whom he met on the plane 2 years ago. If Poplar Fruit was a beginner, then Professor Mills was a master speaker with a wealth of experience. It wasn't just TED. Professor Mills was famous even before TED. He had received many invitations to speak in the United States. At the TED conference, Professor Mills told his story to the point of tears and won the TED Award in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, his project did not come to fruition as he had described. Perhaps there was a cruel reality between the two. Poplar Fruit did not have Professor Mills' contact information. He was not a beauty. Why would Professor Mills give his name card to a young fan he met on the plane? However, Poplar Fruit thought of a quick and effective way to contact Professor Mills. Professor Mills was a neurology professor at Harvard University, and there was someone at Harvard who knew Poplar Fruit. It was Professor Ritchie who had invited Poplar Fruit to Harvard. Professor Ritchie didn't treat Poplar Fruit differently just because Professor Ritchie rejected Poplar Fruit. Later, Professor Ritchie and Poplar Fruit kept in touch. Although the two were in different schools, different countries, and even different time zones, they still had academic discussions through email. After writing the email to Professor Rich, Poplar Fruit came out of the study because Fong Beibei and Kiki were already back. Kiki happily hugged the Pleasant Goat bag and ran to her father to show off. The school bag was not big, only a little bigger than an iPad. The Poplar Fruit waited, and it was very light. What Kiki liked was the pink pattern on the outer layer of the school bag. The seller had purposely made 2 cute protruding corners to make the style of the cartoon character more vivid. "Uncle, this daughter of yours is hopeless." Fong Beibei deliberately sighed and laughed. "I want to pick another bag for her. SpongeBob SquarePants, Minions, and even the song she has always been singing. She doesn't even want the bag from Frozen. She only wants Pleasant Goat. A lot of kids nowadays don't choose Pleasant Goat anymore. The most popular one is Minions, and I also think Minions look good." Fong Beibei didn't care about these problems. She was just teasing Kiki. "Pleasant Goat is the best." Kiki pouted and said unhappily, "Pleasant Goat can defeat Big Wolf and protect the other lambs in the village. A lot of people like Pleasant Goat, but you bought Beautiful Goat." Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Pleasant Goat was a male character, so the pink school bag had the Beautiful Goat pattern on it. Beautiful Goat, Kiki also likes it. Poplar Fruit was not difficult for Kiki, who knew this cartoon like the back of her hand. She was afraid that her father and mother didn't know, so she pulled Poplar Fruit's hand and let Poplar Fruit sit down. Then she held her school bag and seriously explained, "Beautiful Goat is the most beautiful, and she is very kind and cute, just like Kiki." After she finished speaking, Chi-Chi even coyly assumed a shy posture. Poplar Fruit was amused by Kiki and laughed. Someone said that she was beautiful, kind, and cute. Where did this little brat's confidence come from? Seeing her father laughing like this, Kiki was not happy. She climbed onto the sofa and reached out to cover her father's mouth. She pouted and said, "Papa, don't laugh." This coquettish tone made Poplar Fruit happy. He rubbed Kiki's little face and smiled. "Okay, Kiki is right. Our Kiki is so kind and cute, and beautiful, and Pleasant Goat's bravery." Kiki added, "Yes, yes." Poplar Fruit smiled and turned to Fong Beibei and said, "It's okay. Anyway, Kiki picked it, so it can be considered as supporting the domestic cartoon. If Kiki was tired of carrying this school bag, then they could just buy another one." In the evening, after dinner, Kiki had finished bathing. Fong Bei helped her change her clothes in the bedroom and gave her some safety education. After all, this was a kindergarten, an environment full of strangers. Without the care of himself or Fong Bei, even if there was a conscientious teacher and a strict kindergarten safety system, Poplar Fruit and the rest still wanted Kiki to learn some precautions. It was best to leave this matter to Fong Bei, who was more patient and resourceful. However, Kiki, who had just finished bathing, was full of energy. Her big eyes looked around. Sometimes she looked at the toys on the side, and sometimes she looked at Goldie, who was waiting for her outside the door with its tongue out. She was a little absent-minded. Kiki, come, Mommy will ask you some questions, okay? Fong Bei pulled Kiki's little arm and said. It was quite innovative to ask questions instead of boring lectures. Okay. Chi-Chi was still quite obedient. It was just that the way she looked left and right had already revealed her inner desire to leave and play. Poplar Fruit stood at the side and looked at it funny. Goldie crawled at his feet. Fong Bei had already started to ask. If there is a stranger who comes and asks you, say, Kiki, I have a piece of cake here. Do you want to eat it? What will you say? Fong Bei, in order to act more realistic, even stretched out her hand. Kiki was absent-minded, but when she heard about the cake, her eyes immediately lit up. She giggled, nodded, and said, Okay, Kiki wants to eat the cake. Poplar Fruit almost laughed out loud. Of course, it was a bitter laugh. No, Kiki wants to say it. I don't want it. Fong Bei waved her hand and said, How can you eat the food of strangers? Isn't that right? If there is a stranger who wants to give Kiki cake to eat, what will Kiki say? Kiki blinked doubtfully, but still obediently said, I don't want it. That's right. Fong Bei nodded and then continued to ask that if there's an uncle who comes and says, Kiki, let's go, I'll buy you ice cream. In such hot weather, ice cream is the best to eat. What will Kiki say? Ice cream? Kiki's eyes, which were drifting, immediately turned back. She even licked her lips and nodded vigorously. Okay. Chapter 11:18. The title comes from a video, which is also the inspiration for this chapter. Everyone can watch a video of my daughter being taught by her mother not to be deceived by strangers. My daughter is really cute. It's over, it's hopeless. Kiki, this girl, will definitely be seduced by someone with cake or ice cream in the future. Poplar Fruit, as a father, felt like crying. It was as if the theme song of Fong Bei's favorite Korean drama this year, You Are My Destiny, You Are My Very Thing, You Are My One Love, was ringing in his ears. Unfortunately, everything in Kiki's eyes was not her father, but that damn cake and ice cream. No! Fong Bei pinched Kiki's little nose and said, Kiki, you can't say yes. You must remember to refuse and say I don't want. I don't want. Kiki giggled. After a while, she came back to her senses and asked curiously, why? Because it's very likely that the person who wants to buy the cake and ice cream for Kiki is a bad guy. Fong Bei thought for a while and said, he will trick Kiki to a corner where no one will notice and then take Kiki away. Just like Grey Wolf taking away the beautiful sheep? Kiki asked. However, looking at her expression and big eyes, why was there a little hope in her frightened look? Fong Bei did not notice. She pretended to be Big Bad Wolf and scratched Chi-Chi while baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. She said, Yeah, isn't it scary? Poplar Fruit knew that Kiki was not afraid at all. As a father, he knew best what this girl was thinking. Poplar Fruit had given her a very safe environment since she was young, and she rarely encountered danger. So Kiki was actually very naive and felt that she was living in a fairy tale world. She asked that question just now because she thought that there would be a pleasant sheep, or that she would simply be a pleasant sheep and bravely fight with Grey Wolf. Poplar Fruit coughed twice and interfered, saying, No, it's different from Grey Wolf. Kiki, do you still remember 2 years ago when Dad drove you and Uncle Mosquito out on a trip? Kiki was almost taken away by bad guys. If Dad hadn't found out in time, Kiki might have really been taken away. Because she had inherited Poplar Fruit's genes, as Poplar Fruit himself thought. Kiki had a photographic memory that was comparable to her dad's. As long as she started to have her own thinking ability, Kiki would remember basically everything that had happened. However, that experience really frightened Kiki. People had self-protection mechanisms, and Kiki was the same. Over the past 2 years, Kiki had gradually buried this bad memory in the depths of her mind until her dad dug it out. If she was taken away by bad guys, then she would never see Dad again. He wanted to play the bad guy, so Poplar Fruit made up his mind and said, if Kiki could never see Dad again, would you be sad? Kiki gradually recalled the scene at that time, and her big eyes showed real fear. Not only was she afraid, but Kiki's mouth was pursed and her eyes were misty. She was about to cry. Okay, don't scare the child. Fong Bei Bei, who was playing the bad guy, didn't appreciate it. She pushed Poplar Fruit angrily and told him not to get involved. She hugged Kiki and began to comfort her. I don't want to go to kindergarten. Kiki pursed her lips and rubbed her eyes. Kiki, Dad is right, but it's not that scary. Fong Bei Bei said softly, Kiki just needs to remember not to eat things given by strangers, not to listen to strangers, and not to follow strangers. Then there will be teachers to protect Kiki in kindergarten, and Mom or Dad will pick you up when you go home. You won't be in danger. Kiki nodded vigorously and said, Yes, Kiki will say no. Fong Bei Bei laughed and said, That's right, Kiki is so smart. But what if an uncle comes and says to Kiki, Little friend, Uncle's leg is sprained. Can you take Uncle to the hospital? What should Kiki do? Fong Bei Bei didn't finish and continued to ask. Poplar Fruit had discussed this problem with her because Kiki was too kind and didn't know how to distinguish between good and bad. Sometimes, even if she wasn't cheated because of her gluttony, she might be cheated by others using her kindness and innocence. Kiki obviously hesitated for a moment, but Kiki was still smarter. She thought of what Fong Bei Bei had been emphasizing just now. She pursed her lips and said gloomily, No, Kiki won't take Uncle to the hospital. But what if Uncle's leg is really sprained? The little boy frowned and asked. Then Kiki should report it to the kindergarten teacher. Fong Bei Bei raised a finger and said, Well, this is our second principle today. If a stranger asks Kiki to help do something, even if he's not a bad person, Kiki should not help him. You must tell the kindergarten teacher. Kiki suddenly understood and nodded and said, Oh, Kiki understands. I must ask the teacher to help. Yes, if he drags Kiki, or else Kiki will tell the teacher. He must be a bad person. Fong Bei Bei said, At this time, Kiki must shout for help and let the good people around beat him. Will Dad come to save Kiki? Kiki looked at her father standing at the side and asked expectantly. Yes, if Kiki is in danger, Dad will definitely come to save Kiki. Fong Bei Bei smiled and said, But sometimes when Dad is not by Kiki's side, then Kiki must pay attention to these possible dangers and protect herself. Chi-Chi nodded her head. She was finally listening attentively. There's more, Fong Bei Bei said with a smile. If there are other children in the kindergarten, or if their parents want to invite Kiki to play at home, what should Kiki do? Because of this question, Kiki fell into confusion again. She thought for a moment, tilted her head, and looked at her mother and replied, Say no, yes. Kiki's answer is great. Fong Bei Bei gave Kiki a thumbs up and said with a smile, Because in these invitations, it may bring danger to Kiki. And if Kiki goes to play at someone else's house and your parents can't find you, won't they be worried? Kiki nodded. Yes. So Kiki has to say to the other party, No, I have to wait for my parents to come and get their permission before I can go. Fong Bei Bei instructed, It's also possible that the other party will say, No, I've already told your parents and they know. Then Chi-Chi definitely can't agree to it. She must get her parents' approval in person. Kiki nodded vigorously and said, Kiki knows. Pleasant Goat also said that if the bad guy lied to the child and said that it was your father who asked me to pick you up, then you must not listen to him and go with him. Fong Bei Bei clapped her hands with a smile and said, You're absolutely right. Okay, Fong Bei Bei said, Now that I'm done with my questions, let's go over it again, okay? Kiki said happily, Okay. For example, if a stranger came over and gave Kiki a lollipop, then said, "Little girl, you're so pretty. Why don't you go see the goldfish with Uncle?" Fong Bei held back her laughter and glanced at Poplar Fruit, whose mouth was wide open awkwardly, and continued to ask, "What should Kiki say?" Okay, okay. Kiki nodded without hesitation. Ah. Fong Bei pouted and was unhappy. She was prepared to teach Kiki again. Unexpectedly, Kiki smiled slyly. She escaped from Fong Bei's arms and burrowed into the blankets, giggling. "Don't fool around. What should I say? What should I say?" Fong Bei suppressed her anger and stretched her smooth arm into the blankets to tickle Kiki. No. Kiki's voice was muffled and she could not stop laughing in the blankets. "I really don't know what to do with this little fellow." Chapter 11:19. With Professor Ritchie's help, Poplar Fruit was able to contact Professor Mills. Professor Mills still remembered Poplar Fruit. However, he now knew that the young man he chatted with on the plane had also achieved great results. Professor Mills was still very happy to help Poplar Fruit. He taught Poplar Fruit a lot of speech tips and also recommended a few really helpful books on public speaking to Poplar Fruit. Of course, they were all in English, but this was not a problem for Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit felt that Professor Mills's biggest inspiration for him was not the tips and book recommendations, but a sentence he said to Poplar Fruit: "No speaker relies on theory. If you want to speak well, there is only one way, and that is to only by constantly speaking and constantly sensing one's own shortcomings in a real speech environment and constantly making up for one's shortcomings and improving oneself before the next speech could one possibly become a successful speaker." Poplar Fruit might not have high aspirations to become a successful speaker, but Professor Mills's words made Poplar Fruit understand one thing. Now, he should not rush for success. He should not deliberately make his first speech perfect. That was obviously impossible. However, he would persevere and work hard to improve himself. He would make his speeches more and more exciting and resonate with the audience. He would be able to ignite the passion of the young students for public welfare. Poplar Fruit believed that he could do it. Poplar Fruit put down this burden and made some final improvements to his speech. It was September 1st, the big day when Kiki would enter the kindergarten. This was a big event. For Poplar Fruit's family, not only did Poplar Fruit and Fong Bei prepare early, but Fong Jingji's parents also rushed over and made it very grand. Not only did Kiki dress well, but she also tried to stuff toys into her small bag. In fact, her small bag could not hold anything at all. 2 books would probably be enough to fill it. Okay. Poplar Fruit had just taken out a small doll from her bag when Kiki turned around and put a Barbie doll in. Poplar Fruit had to stop her. The teachers don't let children bring toys to play in kindergarten. Why? Chi-Chi asked as she blinked her large eyes in confusion. This was a good question. Poplar Fruit did not know the correct answer, but he did remember that there was such a rule. Therefore, he could only brace himself and make up an answer. Because there are toys in kindergarten. Children can play with kindergarten toys. Poplar Fruit explained. But if the toys there are not fun, can't Kiki play with her own toys? Kiki pouted and was not satisfied with this answer. Poplar Fruit sometimes felt that explaining to Kiki was actually a challenge to his IQ. The little girl was too smart. There were many things that she did not understand, but when she analyzed, it really made sense. This problem definitely could not be explained by the rules of the kindergarten, because Kiki would definitely not comply. Moreover, Poplar Fruit's education philosophy for Kiki was based on reason. Forcing children to follow a rule might sometimes lead to a rebellious mentality. Think about it. If all the children play with their own toys, will there be a situation where Kiki wants to play with other children, but other children only like their own toys and do not like to play with Kiki? Poplar Fruit hypothesized a scenario. Kiki was already deep in thought, so Poplar Fruit struck while the iron was hot and said, "In kindergarten, Kiki should get to know more children and become good friends with them, right? Moreover, the kindergarten teachers will organize a lot of small games for Kiki and other children to play happily together. Wouldn't that be more interesting than Kiki playing with toys by herself? Poplar Fruit felt that Kiki's grip on the Barbie doll was not as strong as before. He smiled and gently took in his hand, shook it, and asked, "So, is it better to leave the Barbie doll at home and wait for Kiki to come back at night? Anyway, the Barbie doll won't run away at home, right?" Kiki looked at the Barbie doll reluctantly, but in the end, she nodded and said, "Okay." Outside, Father Fong and Mother Fong praise in unison. "Wow, Kiki is dressed so beautifully today." Kiki thinks so too. The little girl giggled as she was kissed in the arms of her grandparents. Chi-Chi really liked her outfit today. She wore a red doe-like sweater with a cartoon deer on it, a short woolen tutu skirt, and a pair of soft and warm black leggings. Paired with a small and cute fisherman's hat and cool snow boots, she really couldn't look too good. In kindergarten, you have to listen to the teachers. Mother Fong pulled Kiki and looked at her left and right. Then, she kept reminding her, "Also, don't be deceived by those little boys. Girls have to be reserved. If the boys say that they like you, Kiki has to say." Kiki rushed to say no. "That's right." Mother Fong smiled and glanced proudly at Poplar Fruit, who was blushing with shame. Fong Bei covered her mouth and laughed secretly. She and Poplar Fruit both knew that her mother was using this as a pretext to make a fuss. They drove Kiki to the entrance of the kindergarten. It was a Western-style villa. Of course, it was 2 floors higher than a villa. There was a garden and a beautiful little amusement park inside. There were no walls, but the fence was very high. It was very good for the safety of the children. The kindergarten teachers were lined up in 2 rows at the entrance. There were white, black, and Chinese people, regardless of their nationality. They all smiled and greeted the children as they entered. The children also responded politely. They only said "old students" here. At the entrance, there were still many children who had just entered the kindergarten hugging their parents and crying. Regardless of whether they were Chinese or foreign children, they were all children. As long as they were children, they would have a strong mentality of dependence on their parents. How could they not cry when they left their parents for the first time? Therefore, Poplar Fruit looked at Kiki, who was in the back seat being hugged by Mother Fong and Father Fong. This little girl's dependence on him was no worse than any other child's. After getting out of the car, Poplar Fruit decided to hug his daughter and ask, "Kiki, later, you'll have to leave Daddy and Mommy and then go to kindergarten in this courtyard. Are you afraid? Daddy, are you coming back to pick Kiki up tonight?" Kiki looked at her father and asked, "Of course. Daddy will definitely come to pick you up, no matter how busy I am." Poplar Fruit said affectionately. He could not guarantee the future, but today was Kiki's first time going to kindergarten. How could Poplar Fruit not come pick her up? Then Kiki won't be afraid. Kiki smiled brightly. She reached out and pressed between Poplar Fruit's eyebrows and said, "Daddy, you have wrinkles here. Daddy doesn't have wrinkles. I'm worried about you." So I pinched them. Poplar Fruit nudged the little girl with his forehead. Kiki said goodbye to her grandfather, grandmother, and mother one by one. In the end, Poplar Fruit could not help but hug his daughter and kiss her little face again and again. He said, "Good girl, be good and make more friends. Have fun. Daddy will make some delicious food tonight, and I'll take you home to eat. Okay? Okay, let's pinky swear." Kiki happily reached out and pinky swear with her father. Yanghua explained a few more things to the kindergarten teacher. In the end, she watched Chi-Chi walk into the kindergarten with a bright smile on her face. She kept looking back and waving her hand as she walked into the kindergarten. It's time to go. Otherwise, Kiki won't be able to let go. Fong Bei pulled Poplar Fruit's hand and said, "Uncle, you seem to be crying. How could that be?" Poplar Fruit strongly denied. He turned his head to open the car door and said with a smile, "It's just sand blowing into my eyes." What vulgar excuse. Mother Fong curled her lips. Chapter 11:20. Watching Kiki enter the garden, Poplar Fruit still felt inexplicably sad, even though he would be able to see the cute and naughty little girl again in a few hours. After sending Poplar Fruit's parents home, he didn't have much to do. The semester hadn't started yet, So Poplar Fruit went to pick up a package and went to Fong Beibei's pet hospital to help. Fong Beibei had been spending a lot of time at the pet hospital recently, mainly to settle down a new batch of stray cats and dogs waiting for adoption. She also led the hospital's copywriters to record the files of these children. What is this? Seeing the big boss come in, the copywriter looked curiously at the express delivery box in his hands and asked, "Books?" Poplar Fruit laughed. He turned his head and looked at Fong Beibei, who was wearing a white coat. "Baby, give me a paper cutter." Fong Beibei handed it to him. Like the copywriter, she pressed down on her knees and leaned over to look curiously at Poplar Fruit opening the package on the ground. In the box were 9 paperback books with beautiful covers. The copywriter and Fong Beibei had a hard time reading them because they were all written in English. However, Fong Beibei quickly guessed what these books were. "Uncle, are these your books?" The Theory of Word Splitting. Fong Beibei asked happily, "Didn't you say that it was only officially published today?" Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded. "It was only published today, but this is the first edition. The people in Beijing sent it directly to me before it was released." "Big boss, did you write all of these?" The copywriter knew that her boss was very good. There was no lack of news about Poplar Fruit on the internet, but seeing was better than hearing about it. There were so many English books, and they were all written by the big boss. That was too awesome. "Don't worship me too much. I'm just a legend." Poplar Fruit chuckled. He and Fong Beibei moved the books to the dean's office. They would take them back when they returned. The country is still too stingy. Poplar Fruit curled his lips and said to Fong Beibei. In addition to the English version, Poplar Fruit had also translated several mainstream languages around the world. This was not a difficult task for Poplar Fruit. After all, he had written the book himself. Poplar Fruit knew every sentence and word in the book like the back of his hand. Poplar Fruit was able to translate it after spending a bit of his sleepless night. And this was free labor. Even if they made money, the country probably did not intend to give Poplar Fruit share. Or perhaps the country did not intend to make money at all. For this kind of cultural promotion book, the country would probably be willing to pay for it. "All right, I've already left a big name for you on the cover of the book. Isn't that enough?" Fong Beibei said cheerfully. Indeed, when Poplar Fruit saw his name, English name, Leon Yang, as the sole author, placed on the cover of every book, it was a great satisfaction for Poplar Fruit. Although there were many famous old professors in the editorial team, there was no doubt that the author of the book, the inventor of the theory, was Poplar Fruit. The old professors were noble and did not covet the honor that belonged to Poplar Fruit. Not only that, but there was also a brief introduction of Poplar Fruit at the back. Was this not a recognition of him? However, because of Kiki, Poplar Fruit did not pay much attention to his book today. He chatted with Fong Beibei, and the topic returned to Kiki. "This girl's heart is too big. When she goes to kindergarten, the other children are crying, but she's different. She's still smiling." Poplar Fruit curled his lips and said. Fong Beibei covered her mouth and laughed. She said, "How can a father be like you? Isn't it good that your daughter doesn't cry? Yesterday, you were worried that Kiki would refuse to go to kindergarten." Poplar Fruit sighed and said, "That's true, but when I saw that the girl didn't cry, I felt quite bad. You feel that you're not that important in Kiki's heart, so you're disappointed, right?" Fong Beibei said to Poplar Fruit as she wrote on her tablet. Poplar Fruit nodded honestly. "No, you're thinking too much." Fong Beibei lifted the naughty bangs on her forehead and laughed. "In fact, Kiki still cares about you. Did you forget that Kiki asked if you would pick her up at night? It's because of your promise that she can go to kindergarten so easily." "That's true." Poplar Fruit nodded. In fact, Kiki was not as strong as Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei thought. After 2 hours, she couldn't sit still in the kindergarten. She missed her father and mother very much. In the past, even if Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei went to class and left her at Grandma Chen's house, it would only take 1 or 2 hours. At noon, they would still come to pick Kiki up. Fortunately, the kindergarten teachers were better at coaxing children. They quickly used more interesting games to divert the attention of the gradually restless children. However, Kiki's temper, after waking up from her afternoon nap, was something that even the most experienced kindergarten teacher couldn't appease. At 3 o'clock, the kindergarten teachers really couldn't do anything about Kiki, who had been crying for more than half an hour. The little girl also successfully infected her mood of missing her father to other children, making the children in the kindergarten cry. Poplar Fruit received the phone call. His first reaction was joy. This girl finally wanted her father. His second reaction was anxiety. Poplar Fruit was so anxious that he wanted to drive to see his daughter immediately. However, Fong Beibei stopped him. This is a stage that Kiki has to go through. Fong Beibei shook her head and looked at Poplar Fruit. She said, "If you go, what about in the future? Will you go every time? Can Kiki still go to kindergarten alone?" Poplar Fruit was silent for a while. Then, he decided to only appease the little girl over the phone. Fong Beibei was right. Kiki had to learn to reduce her dependence on her father. Although Poplar Fruit was very reluctant and didn't feel right, Poplar Fruit knew that it was for the good of his daughter. This whole day, Poplar Fruit was absent-minded. His daughter's first day of kindergarten was also a torture for him as a father. In the afternoon, when he was boiling soup at home, Poplar Fruit almost forgot to put something in it to boil. It took a long time before he remembered. For Chef Yang, this was the first time he encountered such a situation. Although he was on time, Poplar Fruit still arrived at the entrance of the kindergarten half an hour early. After waiting for a long time, he finally saw the beautiful little girl in the noisy group of children. "Kiki," Poplar Fruit called out and strode over. "Papa." Kiki cheered and threw herself into Poplar Fruit's arms. After saying goodbye to the teacher and the new friends, Kiki could finally go home with her father. Along the way, the little girl couldn't sit still in Fong Beibei's arms. She kept pulling her father's driver's seat and talking to him. "Papa, Kiki told you that many children in the kindergarten speak English, but there are a few children who don't know how to speak it. Papa, Kiki met a lot of friends today. Papa just met Anderson and Michelle, but there's also Papa. As soon as the lark opened its mouth, the sweet song could no longer be stopped. Poplar Fruit listened carefully and smiled. It was as if he had come to a vast grassland with blue sky, white clouds, and continuous green grass. His mood was just right. Chapter 11:21. In the blink of an eye, September had passed. In the past September, Poplar Fruit's time was basically spent shuttling between various cities. Basically, Poplar Fruit would be out for 4 days every week and only 3 days at home. Of course, Kiki wasn't very satisfied. In the first 2 weeks, she often complained that her father wasn't home. However, this couldn't be helped. Therefore, Kiki cherished the time she could spend with her father more and more. On the weekends, she didn't pester her father to go anywhere. Being able to play with her father at home was the greatest happiness. Of course, the popular "Where Are We Going, Dad?" was also an eternal weekend program at home. Poplar Fruit would generally decline social engagements, other chores, and the work at hand to accompany his daughter and girlfriend to watch TV. In 1 month, Poplar Fruit gave 20 speeches in 8 cities, sometimes 2 a day. This was an incredible number for many people, and even for Poplar Fruit, it was not a small challenge. However, Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth and persevered. 20 speeches said about the same content. Poplar Fruit went from being disgusted to being numb. This could be considered as advancing from a rookie to a qualified speaker. There was still a certain distance between him and a speaker. However, it was undeniable that Poplar Fruit's progress was very obvious. After every speech, Poplar Fruit had been summarizing his gains and losses. The notebook was full of notes, and even the mistakes he made in that second were recorded. A strong memory was willful. Every night, he took time to think about how to improve the content of his speech. In any case, he had countless real materials and expressions in his mind for him to choose from. In this way, every day, little by little, Poplar Fruit gradually improved from being able to arouse the enthusiasm of fans who love public welfare or himself to being able to influence the emotions of students who didn't know, didn't care, and just came to watch. This was already not simple. One had to know how difficult it was for someone who was not enthusiastic about public welfare to abandon their prejudices and sacrifice their time to invest in public welfare. Of course, Poplar Fruit couldn't do it now, but he was improving. Moreover, he was reading some historical materials and learning how to stir up emotions from the speeches of historical figures. In any case, he wasn't doing anything crooked, calling on capable and ambitious university students to donate some of their spare time from playing games or daydreaming to support the development of poor areas was a good thing. It was a good thing that reflected social fairness and the kindness and love of young people. Even though it wasn't the ideal situation, Yangguo was happy to see that after every speech, all the students were willing to stand up and applaud for him. The applause lasted for a long time, and the discussion with the students wasn't finished yet. Perhaps after a speech, although only a few dozen people would be willing to join the charity team of remote teaching, which was far from enough, as long as the remaining few hundred people were willing to pass on Poplar Fruit's speech to their friends and let more people know about remote teaching, more members would join. This was the so-called "a single spark can start a prairie fire." After September, Poplar Fruit was really tired. There were classes every week and some translation work. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit welcomed a small long holiday in October. During the week of National Day, Poplar Fruit did not need to go out and run around. He also did not need to busy himself with school matters and his studies. During the holidays, Poplar Fruit brought Kiki to Changlong, but not to Yanqing's Changlong. Although Yanqing's Changlong was popular because of the movie Where Are We Going, Daddy?, there were too many people during the holidays. Poplar Fruit drove Fong Bebe and Kiki to Zhucheng, where a new Changlong amusement park was built a few years ago. Zhucheng's Changlong was not worse than Yanqing's. There was an ocean kingdom there. Other than looking at whales and sharks through the glass windows in the underwater tunnel, Kiki was the happiest when she went on the water roller coaster. Sitting on the water roller coaster, passing through the floating ice in the polar region, she could even wave at the silly polar bear. There was also the International Circus City. It happened to be National Day, and the Circus City invited circuses from all over the world to perform for the audience. For 4 consecutive nights, Poplar Fruit and the rest enjoyed the gold medal performances of France's Tomorrow and the Future, Morocco's Monte Carlo International Circus Festival, Moscow International Circus Festival, and other circuses from all over the world. Chi-Chi, on the other hand, didn't miss a single show. She would yell and support every show like a little movie fan, wishing that she could go down there and play with these cute seals, fierce lions, and stupid zebras. The place to stay was chosen by Kiki. There were many theme hotels in Changlong, such as the dolphin-themed Hengqin Bay Hotel and the European-style Circus Hotel. In the end, Kiki chose the cute penguin-themed hotel. In the blue-toned room, not only was the wallpaper inside, even the wardrobe and chairs looked like penguins. There was also an iceberg-like slide in the room. Although the slide was not new, Kiki still had fun playing with it after changing into the penguin pajamas she bought in the hotel lobby. Of course, Poplar Fruit and Fong Bebe also changed into penguin pajamas. At night, when Kiki was tired from playing, the penguin father and mother would hold the penguin doll and sleep comfortably in the ocean ship in the Antarctic. Oh yes, there were also a lot of shrimp, crab, and starfish pillows. At this time, Changlong Pearl City was not as popular as other scenic spots. In addition, most of the tourists who came to Pearl City eventually went to Macau. Therefore, Yangguo and the others enjoyed a holiday where they did not have to look at the sea of people. Of course, the cost was not small. For 4 days of hotel expenses, ticket expenses, and other expenses, Poplar Fruit roughly calculated that it cost at least 20,000 yuan. It's 21,773 yuan. Fong Bebe calculated the most accurately. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is to have fun, Kiki, right? Poplar Fruit said with a smile. He looked through the rearview mirror at Kiki, who was still leaning against the window and looking at Pearl City that was gradually getting farther and farther away. Kiki turned to look at her father and responded crisply, "Yes." Fong Bebe also asked with a smile. Then, Will Kiki come here to play in the future? Kiki's eyes were bright, and she nodded vigorously. No one knew how happy she was. When they went back, the mood of the family was like the blue and clean sky of Pearl City. Yangsheng seemed to be affected by Kiki's happiness, and flowers were everywhere. In the autumn of the Southern Kingdom, everything did not wither, but became more and more lively. Of course, after the short break, Poplar Fruit had to devote himself to the intensive speech schedule. This time, Poplar Fruit wanted to let all the colleges and universities that he went to enthusiastically throw themselves into this epic-making education reform for public welfare. Chapter 1122. In October, not long after the National Day, this year's Nobel Prize in Literature was finally announced. The French novelist Patrick Modiano won the long-distance race. This great writer, known as one of the three masters of contemporary French writers in France, was not very famous in China. Even if he won the award, it did not cause any waves in China. The sales of his works later proved this point. The Nobel Prize in Literature winning Dark Shop Street and Sunday in August have been sold by Yilin Publishing for 7 years. Including 2015, after the award, the sales of these two works in China were not as high as the sales of any of Monroe's short story collections in 2014. The quality of the novel was originally very good. Poplar Fruit had read the original book, but as the netizens on Dubon commented, the Chinese translation was terrible. Poplar Fruit felt that the new Translation Road publishing house could find a mediocre translator to translate these hundreds of thousands of words better than it. It was a pity for Modiano. Of course, Poplar Fruit could not do anything about it. After all, New Translation Road Publishing House did not pay attention to the introduction of foreign books this time. It was normal for Yilin to seize the opportunity. Of course, the Nobel Prize winner this year was not famous. The main reason was that there were no Chinese elements in it like in the previous 2 years. In 2012, teacher Mo Yin won the award, and the 2013 winner's work was also translated by a Chinese Poplar Fruit. There were also netizens who teased, saying that Poplar Fruit had expected that this year's Nobel Prize winner would not do well, so he did not get involved. At a glance, it was obvious that they were not hardcore fans of Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit's hardcore fans all knew that Poplar Fruit was very busy. Furthermore, Poplar Fruit had devoted most of his energy this year to public welfare and Chinese teaching theory. In particular, the global promotion of Poplar Fruit's word-splitting teaching theory was a national project. Poplar Fruit led all the great scholars in the Chinese literature world as the only author. This made many Poplar Fruit fans puff out their chests proudly. Our Appa is handsome and has long legs. His love for his daughter and girlfriend is warm and faithful. He is also good at both civil and martial arts. Which one of your Appas can compare to him? A netizen's words resonated with many people. In the past, when I chased after celebrities, my mother didn't allow it. Only Poplar Fruit Appa was different. My mother even encouraged me to chase after celebrities. She even used her connections to get me to listen to Poplar Fruit Appa's lectures. The way he gave a serious speech was so handsome, okay? It had to be said that Poplar Fruit had indeed become a role model for more and more parents to educate their children. Although Poplar Fruit's achievements were mainly in the macro aspect, it did not prevent fans from worshiping Poplar Fruit. Of course, whether it was positive or negative, it didn't affect Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit had never held a cram school on Weibo just because he was called a role model by many mothers. For example, he answered some homework questions from fans. He also didn't talk about parenting skills every day just because he often posted pictures of his daughter. In short, Poplar Fruit was such a low-key person and frivolously posted pictures of his daughter. Unfortunately, Poplar Fruit and Kiki's fans like this. Therefore, Poplar Fruit's fans have been increasing occasionally, but most of the time, it was increasing slowly. In late October, Poplar Fruit came to Beijing, which had the largest number of students. He would give as many as 10 speeches here. The first one he came to was Beijing University. Of course, Poplar Fruit could now control the rhythm of his speeches very well, and his performance was very exciting. Especially at the end, when Poplar Fruit waved his hand and asked how many people were willing to share their 1 or 2 hours of free time a week to have a beautiful encounter with poor and backward people that they didn't know at all. The whole audience raised their hands. This made Poplar Fruit feel touched, but it was not new. What really surprised Poplar Fruit was that after the speech, a black exchange student came from behind and wanted to communicate with him. The other party's Chinese was very awkward, but it was still within the range of communication. Poplar Fruit was surprised to find that the other party was not an American, but a black person from the African continent. International exchange students were not rare. Higashiyama University had many, but most of the students came from rich countries. Beijing University reflected the difference between Higashiyama University and Beijing University. For example, this black student came from Tanzania, a country that was far more poor and backward than the Chinese people could imagine. This black student from Tanzania was very interested in the long-distance education that Poplar Fruit talked about. Poplar Fruit did not know much about Tanzania, but some information was enough for Poplar Fruit to have a discussion with this black student. Tanzania was one of the least developed countries in the world announced by the United Nations. The economy was mainly agricultural, and they were basically self-sufficient. However, it was a country that placed the most importance on education. Like China, it implemented compulsory education from primary to secondary school. Other than private schools, most of the public schools were free of charge. The literacy rate was as high as 90%, and it was one of the countries with the lowest illiteracy rate in Africa. Since the education level in your country is okay, why are you interested in long-distance education? Poplar Fruit asked curiously. This black student's Chinese was awkward, but it was not bad. Poplar Fruit tried to communicate with him in English, but he could not understand what the other party was saying. His mother tongue, Kiswahili, was quite good, but the problem was that Poplar Fruit did not know it. It seemed that he had to learn more African languages in the future. Now, Poplar Fruit's language level was enough to travel around the world, but there were many native languages in Africa that he had not learned. The black student said, as he gestured with his hands to chat with Yongwa. Poplar Fruit then understood that he was not thinking about the education situation in Tanzania, but was worried about the education situation in his home country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. At home country, it turned out that the black student's parents fled to Tanzania during a civil strife. At that time, the black student was still young, but he was still concerned about his home country. Poplar Fruit then understood that in the Congo, there were too many children who did not go to school, accounting for 6% of the total population, and their education was destroyed by civil strife and conflict again and again. Of course, since the 21st century, the political situation had stabilized a lot, but the development of education was still very slow. You're right, if the young are strong, then China will be strong. Poplar Fruit wanted to correct him that this was not his original idea, but the black student said sincerely, "Our Tanzania's education level has improved, and now the development has caught up, but my home country is still behind, and there are even many people living in ignorant indigenous groups. I hope to help my home country bring about change, using your long-distance teaching." Although he could not bear to reject the other party's hopeful eyes, Poplar Fruit had to pour cold water on the black student. "Makru, dreams are beautiful, but reality is cruel. Sigh. Think about it. Even if there's long-distance teaching, how many children in Africa can use a computer?" Chapter 1123. The black man from Tanzania, Mukuru, wanted to learn from Poplar Fruit's method after listening to Poplar Fruit's speech. He wanted to become the savior of Congo's underprivileged children. However, it was obvious that this idea was too much to take for granted. Whether it was Congo or Tanzania, they did not have the conditions to implement high-tech education. The reason why the poor areas in China could popularize modern classrooms was because they had the support of a large number of wealthy cities, which allowed them to have sufficient financial support to carry out reforms. Moreover, China's relatively stable situation and relatively safe public security environment were also important factors that allowed remote teaching to be popularized. Think about it. In a chaotic country like Congo, where the average annual income was less than 1,000 yuan. If any family had an expensive computer, wouldn't it be equivalent to activating a taunting halo? Robbery was a light punishment. It was already fortunate that they were not killed and robbed. However, Poplar Fruit did not have the heart to pour cold water on Makru. He chatted with him for a long time and even asked him to teach him Kiswahili, which slightly soothed the black man's depressed mood. It cannot be helped. Although Poplar Fruit also wanted to help him, the cruel reality was there. Poplar Fruit was not a god who could turn stone into gold. After arriving in Beijing, Poplar Fruit diligently went to the Ministry of Education a few times and also went to the Confucius Institute's Beijing headquarters. Poplar Fruit's new Chinese teaching method had been promoted all over the world. Of course, the Confucius Institute was the main one. After all, only the country could spread it all over the world in just a few months. The professors at the headquarters happily told Poplar Fruit that the response to the method was very good. It allowed many foreign learners to experience the joy of learning Chinese. Of course, this joy was relative. It was very difficult to be happy with learning. However, compared to the suffering in the past, the relaxation now was a rare joy. Poplar Fruit also had a bad mouth. He happily suggested, "Why don't we record it as a video? Just like university public classes, use video mode to promote it. Maybe more people will be able to see it." Yes, video promotion. In the past, video teaching only existed in VCD players, and the effect was not that obvious. However, things were different now. Other than computers, there were also mobile phones, tablets, carriers, and software that had been upgraded. In addition, YouTube was a video website with a strong influence around the world. It would definitely be more popular than the Confucius Institute, which was limited by geography. The professor who listened to Poplar Fruit's advice was only in his 40s. He was very young, and his understanding of modern equipment was no worse than Poplar Fruit's. Moreover, he had a child who was already in school. The reading machine at home had been played with a lot of tricks. He immediately realized that this suggestion was very good, and there was a lot of room for improvement. It should be noted that video teaching was no longer just video teaching. With Poplar Fruit's remote teaching, the video teaching software had been upgraded and enhanced the interactive experience of video teaching. Perhaps with the software, Chinese teaching would become even more interesting and allow more people around the world to come into contact with and be willing to learn Chinese. If it was a company, no one would be willing to be a spendthrift who would give others a free meal. However, the country was different. The promotion of the Chinese language and the dissemination of traditional Chinese culture was a strategic decision of the country. Regardless of whether the country was willing to do free promotion, if more people were willing to learn and understand Chinese and Chinese, the country would be willing to pay for it. Regardless of how the video teaching would be, the software would be more diverse and interesting. This was what the technical staff needed to think about. What Poplar Fruit needed to do was to record all these video teaching videos. That's right. Poplar Fruit had been cheated by the leaders of the Confucius Institute. The other party had given Poplar Fruit the position of deputy director, and there was no administrative title. They had asked Poplar Fruit to boldly try. Poplar Fruit needed to go back and record a few Chinese teaching videos before putting them on the internet to test the waters. Testing the waters meant that it did not matter if it did not succeed. There was no cost for failure. However, if it succeeded, Poplar Fruit would have to continue recording. The reason for letting Poplar Fruit test the waters was also quite noble. For example, this was an idea proposed by Poplar Fruit, or this was a new theory invented by Poplar Fruit. More importantly, Poplar Fruit was more famous abroad. The response to his videos would definitely be much better than others. In any case, Poplar Fruit still took on this heavy responsibility. Although it would be very tiring for him to record a Chinese teaching video when he was already very busy, it was still a theory that he had researched himself. Just like Kiki, if he was a little tired and did a little more for her, what was there to complain about? What surprised Yanghua was the reaction of one of the leaders of the Ministry of Education when he talked about Makuru. The leader had a good relationship with Uncle Jean of the Ministry of Education in Guangdong. Poplar Fruit only mentioned it as something new. He did not expect the other party to be so serious. He carefully asked about Makaru's thoughts and Poplar Fruit's opinion on this matter. Mr. Ma, this is not realistic. Poplar Fruit said with a bitter smile, think about it. A country like Congo, not to mention the chaos, the country's development mainly depends on agriculture and mining. Where would they get the equipment? Where would the internet come from? This chat did not last long. However, Poplar Fruit did not expect that a few days later, Poplar Fruit would come to Beijing again. Mr. Ma called Poplar Fruit over again. This time, there were some leaders from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and some leaders that Poplar Fruit was not familiar with. Poplar Fruit, what do you think the possibility of Makar's idea being realized is? One of the leaders asked. Poplar Fruit honestly repeated his previous concerns. He went back to learn Kiswahili and also studied the current situation of Tanzania and Congo. The latter was much bigger than Tanzania. It was the second largest country in Africa and the 11th largest in the world. The main language was French. Therefore, Poplar Fruit obtained more information. It was also because of this understanding that Poplar Fruit felt that the possibility was very small. What if we don't consider safety, equipment, and internet? The leader asked. These are issues that the country needs to consider, and they are not considered problems. Poplar Fruit was not stupid. The leader did not say it directly, but he still understood what the other party meant. This was related to China's layout in Africa, just like in the past, including the current African aid projects. For the future, the country would not be stingy with these seemingly useless aid. Since Poplar Fruit did not need to worry about these factors that were difficult for him to eliminate, then perhaps this idea could really be realized. Poplar Fruit's brain started to work quickly. Chapter 1124. For example, we can set up a lot of education bases similar to medical centers in Congo, or we can simply combine them with medical centers and have station troops to help protect them. Poplar Fruit happily expressed his opinions and ideas. Then we can let local African students or students studying in China, together with student volunteers with foreign language skills in our country, provide teaching support for their out-of-school children through the remote teaching platform. As long as the children and women nearby are willing, they can come over to learn. Poplar Fruit said, we don't need to provide too advanced teaching content because their current education level is too low. Most people are ignorant, and what they need the most is to eliminate illiteracy and enlightenment. Needless to say, the initiation and coordination of remote teaching for more than 2 years gave Poplar Fruit a deep understanding of the education model. Just by brainstorming on the spot, Poplar Fruit could say a lot of things. The conversation with the senior management lasted all day, and Poplar Fruit was only able to leave in the evening. However, he still had to organize the things he said into a report and submit it to the leaders. However, compared to the difficulty of the plan, Poplar Fruit did not have to work hard to compile the report that had already formed in his mind. Poplar Fruit did not need to worry about how to carry out the plan, because this was a problem that the country's foreign affairs personnel should think about. They might promote the development of remote teaching through cooperation between countries, or they might use Makura's special identity. Both countries were his motherland, to logically implement the plan. However, Poplar Fruit did not need to worry about this. What did Poplar Fruit need to do? It seemed like there was really nothing to do. Maybe he needed to learn the native language of Africa, then record some Chinese teaching videos. The country's support for education in African countries must be mixed with some private goods, such as Chinese cultural education. No matter what, this was good news for the kind-hearted Mukalu. Regardless of whether China had any private goods or not, when a country was extremely poor, they could only sacrifice some things to gain opportunities for development. This was the sad reality of most African countries. In fact, wasn't China the same in the past? With China's help, at least it was better. At least it was not like those vampire-like capitalists who really dug 3 feet into the ground. There was no need to explain too much about this matter. After all, it had risen to the level of the country and was beyond the scope of Poplar Fruit's consideration. What should Poplar Fruit consider? Of course, it's the cutest little student in our kindergarten, Kiki. Since the little fellow went to kindergarten, she had experienced more and more new things, especially the interesting things with her good friends. She was happy during the day and talked to Poplar Fruit nonstop when she came back at night. If Poplar Fruit wasn't at home, Kiki would talk to her father on the phone while eating breakfast. Poplar Fruit usually didn't have time to answer the phone at night, because by the time the speech was over, it was time for Kiki to go to bed. She had to tell her father everything that the teacher said in the kindergarten, the scene of playing games with the children, and the handwork that the teacher taught her, no matter how big or small. This also made Fong Bei Bei, who was waiting to talk to Poplar Fruit, feel a little jealous. She pouted and said sourly, "Humph, now I'm relying on you. You should just enjoy it. Wait until later, when you're all grown up and run away with other boys. I'll see how you cry." Fong Bei Bei didn't know that Poplar Fruit secretly called Kiki's performance a happy annoyance. After all, the little fellow's memory was too good. For the whole day, she could remember every word that everyone said to her. Therefore, in a situation where she didn't know how to make a long story short and not say anything short, Chi-Chi and Yangguo would go on and on endlessly. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had a role model to teach Kiki. "Kiki, look at Sister Belle." After going back to watch the second season of Where Are We Going, Daddy, with Kiki, plot required, Poplar Fruit began to find an opportunity to talk to Kiki. "I like Sister Duo and Brother Feynman," Kiki said. Since she started kindergarten, Kiki's biggest change was the budding of her independent consciousness. It wasn't that she didn't rely on Poplar Fruit, but that she gradually had self-awareness in terms of language. In the past, she had always referred to herself as Chi-Chi. It wasn't that this was bad and it sounded very cute, but compared to her rapidly developing intelligence, Chi-Chi's mind was still stuck at the same age as her own. In fact, because she could act coquettishly and shamelessly in front of her father, Kiki didn't have any intention of growing up. Poplar Fruit didn't have any concerns in this regard. In fact, 2 to 3 years old children were enough to have their own independent consciousness. Personal pronouns like I, you, and him gradually appeared in their language. Perhaps it was the teacher who consciously corrected it, or perhaps it was because Kiki herself had gotten rid of her dependence on her father in kindergarten that she gradually replaced Kiki with I. Of course, that wasn't all. Sometimes, Kiki would also use the name Kiki. However, it was slowly changing. This is a good thing. It was just that it was a little off topic. Poplar Fruit smiled and asked, "That's right. Why do you like Sister Toto more than Sister Belle?" Kiki couldn't say it for a moment. After thinking for a long time, she pouted and said, "Because Sister Toto is a good person. She will take care of her younger brothers and sisters. Besides, Uncle Huang Lei is like Dad. He can cook delicious food." Kiki was right. Poplar Fruit was overjoyed, but it wasn't the answer that Poplar Fruit wanted. Fortunately, Fong Bei Bei helped Poplar Fruit out of the situation. She said, "Brother Feynman doesn't seem to like Sister Belle very much. She keeps talking." Because Sister Belle keeps muttering, "Come on, Feynman. Feynman, Feynman, Feynman. Oh, Feynman, where's Feynman? Oh, so you're here, Feynman." Kiki had seen the video made by the netizens, and she started to learn it with joy. It wasn't any malice. Kiki just felt that it was fun to nag like this, especially when it was accompanied by a fast-paced accompaniment. But everyone doesn't seem to like Sister Belle nagging like this. Poplar Fruit said, "Yes." Kiki thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. "So, when we talk to others, we have to be like Sister Toto. We have to pick the important words to say. It's the same when we tell stories to others. There's no need to repeat everyone's words." Poplar Fruit said to Kiki as if he was implying something. Chi-Chi listened in a daze and nodded in a daze. She still hadn't been able to connect her father's reasoning with her own actions. However, it didn't matter, because Kiki would definitely remember what her father said. One day, she would understand it herself. "All right, let's watch TV, watch TV." Fong Bei Bei smiled and interrupted the preaching at the right time. No matter what, Poplar Fruit had successfully prevented the birth of a little Tang Sung. Chapter 1125. In November, it was Poplar Fruit's birthday. This was nothing new to Poplar Fruit's hardcore fans. Early in the morning, many enthusiastic fans celebrated Poplar Fruit's birthday on the internet and Weibo, just like the fans of other celebrities. There were even some fans who directly sent birthday gifts to the school. Because they didn't have Yangguo's address, the gifts were all sorts of. There were food, drinks, clothes, decorations, and some of them were especially interesting. Poplar Fruit distributed the food and drinks to his classmates. As for the clothes and decorations, although Poplar Fruit wouldn't use them, in order to thank the fans, Poplar Fruit decided to record a video in the practice room at home, which was relatively spacious, with Fong Beibei's help. The content of the video was Poplar Fruit wearing the clothes given by the fans and holding the gift from the fans as he walked on a runway show. There was no editing or fancy interlude. It was just a Xiao Duan video that was pieced together. It was very realistic. For example, in this Xiao Duan, Poplar Fruit was wearing the same Milford wool windbreaker from Sherlock, a navy blue cashmere scarf, and the classic deer hunting hat. When he appeared in front of the camera, the fans' little hearts were already in a commotion. However, there was a burst of laughter and everyone saw the camera shake. "Baby, be more professional. You're the cameraman. How can you laugh?" Poplar Fruit complained on behalf of the fans. Fong Beibei held back her laughter and said, "No. Who told you not to wear shoes? It's too funny." The camera panned down and saw Poplar Fruit's bare feet outside his pants. They were even moving mischievously. "Oh, I'm hopeless. Please kneel and lick my feet." Some female fans didn't even think that Poplar Fruit's big feet spoiled the atmosphere. They were infatuated with this kind of realistic cuteness. All right. Back to the point. Don't pat my feet. The floor here is not suitable for wearing leather shoes. But I still have to thank this fan named XXXX for the full set of Sherlock costume, including the leather shoes. Poplar Fruit returned to the camera and said seriously, "I have to read out the reason why this fan gave me this outfit. There's no other reason. It's because of this drama." Well, she's a diehard fan of this drama. The 2 years that this drama has been airing made her completely depressed. So, she's become a fan of you, which is me. Poplar Fruit took out a piece of paper from his pocket and read aloud. "The reason why she likes me is because I have long legs, I'm handsome, and I'm as talented as blessed curls. Let me make it clear. I'm not trying to boast. I'm just thinking about it. She hopes that I can put on this outfit and recreate the glory of Sherlock." Poplar Fruit put away the note and said helplessly to the camera, "Okay, this reason is barely acceptable. By the way, Beibei also likes to watch this drama. She just told me that it's a pity that this fan didn't write down the last reason, which is that my face is as long as blessed curls." Then, he looked at Fong Beibei behind the camera and said angrily, "How is my face long? Didn't you see the netizens saying that I'm handsome? Come here, I promise I won't hit you." In the end, Poplar Fruit was beaten up by Fong Beibei. Of course, this little routine of the Xiao Duan duo not only caused the fans to burst into laughter, but also many female fans lamented that they didn't meet Poplar Fruit earlier. Looking at the two of them being so happy, they felt so envious and sad. There was also an older girl who felt sad as well. They didn't say anything, so how could they be envious? This video was Poplar Fruit's small response to his fans on Weibo. In contrast, his fans had prepared so much for him. There were a lot of scenes that were worth laughing and remembering. However, no one expected that Poplar Fruit's last sentence would set off a frenzy of public opinion on the internet. Okay, finally, I'll accompany everyone to chat for a while, then I'll compress the video and upload it. The last Xiao Duan was recorded by Poplar Fruit himself in the study with a DSLR. At this time, Kiki and Fong Beibei were already asleep, but Poplar Fruit was very excited and got up in the middle of the night to record this speech. "How old am I this year?" "Yes, 26. Poplar Fruit seemed to be talking to himself. 26 is not old, but I already have a 3-year-old daughter. When it came to Kiki, Poplar Fruit couldn't help but smile, and the joy in his heart was shown on his face. At the beginning of this year, when I had a reunion with my classmates, one of them told me that Poplar Fruit, you are the winner in life. Poplar Fruit recalled and said, "Indeed, I have a house, a car, and a girlfriend who loves me. Actually, I should say that she's my fiancée. I won't tell you when we'll get married, so there's some suspense. And I have the cutest daughter. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, I won't say anything about my career, but to be honest, I feel very satisfied with the two girls I love the most in my life. Today's birthday was celebrated by Bebe and Kiki again. Poplar Fruit said, it's very good because this birthday happened to be on a day when I didn't have to go on a business trip. When I came back from class, they had already prepared everything for me. Decorations, a cake, and a gift. I won't show off the gift so that you won't say that I'm showing off my love. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, but this year, I'm still very touched. The only regret? What's the only regret today? Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, you may think that it's very strange for me to say that I'm very satisfied and happy, but I do have a little regret. When I made a wish before blowing out the candles, I thought, in fact, my wish is the same every year. I hope that my family will be happy together forever. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, so when Kiki asked me, I simply changed it and asked her what her wish was on her birthday. Kiki's birthday was at the end of April, but she refused to say anything after she made a wish. I still remember it. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, today I used my wish to make Kiki say it. It turns out that her wish that day was to participate in Where Are We Going, Dad? Yangwa smiled helplessly and said, actually, I've always known that Chi-Chi has a soft spot for her father, but it's really difficult for me to fulfill her wish. No, it's not a little difficult. It's impossible. After all, I'm not an entertainment figure. It's impossible for such a famous gold program to invite an ordinary person like me, right? Although I'm a little famous on Weibo, I'm grateful for everyone's love. Poplar Fruit shrugged and said with a smile, but in this case, it's not that simple. I realize that I'm still not the perfect father that I want to be. Poplar Fruit said with some emotion, but when it comes to raising children, no one can be perfect. If something is perfect, it will lose its value. On the contrary, a little regret is worth cherishing. So, Poplar Fruit laughed and said, from now on, the 27-year-old Poplar Fruit will continue to work hard in order to truly become Kiki's most handsome, charming, excellent, and invincible father. Chapter 1126. Poplar Fruit had only casually shared his thoughts with the netizens. He did not estimate the impact of his video at all. After uploading the video, Poplar Fruit closed Weibo and other social media apps. He rubbed his palms and was ready to start his translation work. It could be said that there were probably not many translators at Poplar Fruit's level in the country. Even if there were, they would be old translators who were too old to walk. They did not need to use a lot of translation work to improve themselves or maintain their state. However, Poplar Fruit was still young, wasn't he? He still maintained a great passion for translation. Even this year, especially in the second half of the year, Poplar Fruit was so busy that he did not have much time to do translation work. Even so, Poplar Fruit would still use the time when he was awake in the middle of the night to pass the time. That's right, Poplar Fruit did translation for fun. Being able to travel through the author's thought world and swim in different words was Poplar Fruit's special joy. Of course, Poplar Fruit's pastime did not require him to translate some shallow or worthless books. In the new translation industry, in the entire country, Poplar Fruit was also a figure standing at the top of the pyramid. Not to mention that the new translation industry would do its best to help Poplar Fruit collect some valuable literary copyrights. Even if there was nothing that Poplar Fruit was satisfied with, as long as he released the news, there would be a few strengthened camp authors lining up to wait for Poplar Fruit to turn over the brand. This was definitely not an exaggeration. That was because he was Poplar Fruit. The translations of the two-time Nobel Prize in Literature winner and the popular online novels that he translated had already climbed to the top 100 in sales worldwide. Online novels were now very popular abroad, and they were gradually being corrected by the country. Even though Poplar Fruit was not the decisive factor in the birth of this craze, Poplar Fruit was definitely one of its promoters. This year, foreign film and television companies had come to China to discuss the copyright of these online novels with Ting Sun Company. If the copyright of the film and TV series made money, New Translation Road or Zheng Yujie would still have a lot of profits. After all, she had exchanged shares with Tencent Literature. However, it was also because of Poplar Fruit's prowess that all the books translated by Poplar Fruit had to be carefully selected by him. He would never give in because of someone else's recommendation, Chinese characteristics, This included the company. Poplar Fruit had his own assistant who would organize a list of books for Poplar Fruit every month. However, Poplar Fruit had the freedom to choose which books to translate. Currently, Poplar Fruit was preparing to translate 2 books. One was the work of teacher Liu Cixin, who was known as the best science fiction writer in China. Or rather, it could not be said to be one book because the 3-body problem was a series of novels. There were a total of 3 books, collectively known as the Once Upon a Time on Earth trilogy. In fact, teacher Liu was not only famous in China, but he was also a well-known science fiction writer internationally. Most of the English copyrights of his works had been sold. These 3 books were no exception. However, Ting Sun Literature, who had signed a contract with teacher Liu, was ambitious. They recommended his works because they wanted to capture the other small language markets abroad in one fell swoop. Therefore, these books were placed on Poplar Fruit's desk. Generally speaking, Poplar Fruit would not accept such a recommendation. However, teacher Liu's books were different. Poplar Fruit had read all his science fiction works, and they were very, very outstanding. Not only did he not reject them, but he was also excited. He decided to temporarily stop translating online novels and translate the 3-body problem first. There was another book that Poplar Fruit had wanted to translate a long time ago. However, it was also at the beginning of this month that the Copyright Department of New Translation Road officially signed the contract for the Chinese version of the entire book. Island Bookstore was a book that went on sale in the U.S. at the beginning of summer this year. It broke records all the way and became a phenomenal global bestseller in the U.S. and even the whole world. Poplar Fruit read the book not long after it was listed. Needless to say, he liked it. More importantly, he felt the love and happiness in life from this book. In other words, he was very glad that he had such a rich and loving life. Compared to the main character in the book, A.J. Ferrick, Poplar Fruit's greatest happiness was that he had everything that Ferrick wanted: family, love, and health. Of course, Poplar Fruit did not like the ending of the story. Although he understood that the tragedy made the whole story sublime, he just did not like it. He did not like it. It was very difficult to get the Chinese version of the book, let alone the copyright of other languages. The staff of New Translation Road and Poplar Fruit's old rivals, Dongxin and Yilin, had found the author in the United States. However, due to the fierce competition, the other party was hesitant. New Translation Road used Poplar Fruit as their trump card. Lian Yang was famous in the publishing industry all over the world. Everyone knew about Poplar Fruit's works and greatness. However, Dongxin and Yilin shamelessly offered a very high price. It was 1/3 higher than New Translation Road's price. They showed an attitude that they would not let New Translation Road succeed, even if they were to lose money. In the end, Poplar Fruit sent an email to the author, Gabriella Zevin. Poplar Fruit was too busy to go to the United States. I also have a daughter. Poplar Fruit expressed his sincerity and his love for the book. She was born just like A.J. It was like holding little Maya in the bookstore. It was full of surprise and joy. I was young, but I understood A and my daughter. J. My love for Maya. I understood A and my lover. J. My love for Amelia. Everyone has a difficult year in their life. I got through it and ushered in a beautiful happiness. So, I understood everything that you wanted to express in your book. I also have the ability to better present your book to the Chinese readers. Because we all have love, we all want to sow the seeds of love. Because of Poplar Fruit's email, Gabriella Zevin finally gave the Chinese version rights to New Translation Road. However, it was only the Chinese version rights. This was because the other rights of Gabriella's book had been sold long ago. Who asked it to be a bestseller? She once again snatched a big fat piece of meat from veteran publishing houses like Dongxin and Yilin. This book was destined to be a bestseller once it was released, which made Dongxin and Yilin very angry. However, their anger had little to do with Poplar Fruit. If they wanted to vent their anger, it would be directed at New Translation Road. However, New Translation Road was not afraid of them. Now, New Translation Road had more and more contracted translators. From online literature to traditional literature, New Translation Road also trained translators while signing contracts. Gradually, it developed a positive development, like Xinda Translation Road. New Translation Road was no longer the small publishing house that could be bullied by them. Because of the preferential treatment for translators and authors, New Translation Road had become a new benchmark in the publishing industry. While the other publishing houses were still unwilling to cut their meat to make changes, New Translation Road had quickly caught up. Well, without thinking too much, Poplar Fruit put his hands on the keyboard and began his translation work. P.S. Here, I recommend the book Bookstore on the Island. Although it is a bestseller, it is really good. Xiaohan has read more than half of it now and has fallen in love with it deeply. Those who like Kiki will also like Little Maya in the book. But let me give you a heads up. This book will not have a perfect ending. Those who don't like it should be careful, although Xiaohan recommended it. But I have to say that the translation of this book is really bad. But the original content is awesome and save this book. It is currently the #1 bestseller on all major websites. But I have to complain about the low status of translators in the publishing industry. The first translator of this book committed suicide last year due to depression. Unfortunately, this may also be the main reason for the low translation level of this book. But from this translator's introduction, it can be seen that because of the low remuneration, he could only choose to work part-time. This is the current situation in China. There's a lack of talents in the translation industry, and the quality of translations in the publishing industry is mixed. This is the sadness of not being valued in the whole industry and not being improved for a long time. It is a pity that we don't have Poplar Fruit in our lives. There is no New Translation Road. Chapter 11:27. The second day after his birthday, Poplar Fruit received a call from Mr. He. They had been in contact for a long time, but Poplar Fruit still felt guilty towards Mr. He. This was because Poplar Fruit had always rejected Mr. He's invitations to appear on shows. There were Fast Forward and other shows. This summer, Mr. He wanted Poplar Fruit to appear on Central TV's summer vacation show, Young China Strong. Of course, he would be a guest on the show. Poplar Fruit was very interested in this show, but he was too busy, so he had to decline again. But their friendship was still there. Mr. He would visit Poplar Fruit's house every now and then. Mr. He also asked Poplar Fruit for help a while ago. His first movie, Jasmine Blossoms, will be filmed at Guangdong Agricultural University. He asked Poplar Fruit for help with the application and coordination. This was not difficult. Although Poplar Fruit was not from the Agricultural University, he had interacted with the leaders there. Most importantly, Poplar Fruit had connections in both the Education Department and the Education Department. All he had to do was mention it, and the Agricultural University happily agreed. But Mr. He did not seem to want to tell Poplar Fruit about his movie. Instead, he asked, Poplar Fruit, are you going to participate in Where's Dad Go? Yang was stared blankly and asked doubtfully, No, I didn't even receive any notice. Why do you ask? He still did not realize what kind of discussion his video had caused yesterday. Mr. He asked, No, I'm asking if you are interested in participating. Everyone is talking about it online. Mr. He explained a little, and Poplar Fruit realized that the video he posted yesterday had been forwarded and commented on by too many people. Other than Poplar Fruit's fan gift show, Poplar Fruit's last comment attracted a lot of attention. Coincidentally, the second season of Where Are We Going, Dad? Had just finished airing. The popularity of Where Are We Going, Dad? Had not cooled down yet. People were already thinking and guessing the guest list for the next season. As for Poplar Fruit, he didn't think much of it. Even when he was explaining to teacher, he thought, I didn't say that I had to go, Daddy. I'm just being generous because I can't fulfill my daughter's wish, so I'm looking forward to the future. Poplar Fruit laughed. What's wrong with that? I didn't complain that Mango Terrace didn't give us a chance. That's obviously impossible, isn't it? Poplar Fruit, you underestimate your own influence. Teacher, he said. Mr. He had more than 60 million fans. Of course, Poplar Fruit couldn't compare to him, but they weren't that far behind. Poplar Fruit's Weibo was also a verified account with tens of millions of fans. Although there would definitely be a lot of fake fans, if there were a few die-hard fans, it would still be very impressive. Just like that, the fans kept urging Mango Terrace to invite Poplar Fruit to be a guest for the next season. This topic instantly became a hot topic. Huh, I've caused you so much trouble? Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said embarrassedly, how about this? I'll post on Weibo to appease the fans. There's no need. Do you think I'm calling to criticize you? Teacher, he said with a smile. In reality, Teacher, he and Poplar Fruit had nothing to do with each other, even though they were colleagues. With Teacher, he's relationship with Poplar Fruit, he definitely wouldn't criticize Poplar Fruit over such a small matter. Also, this isn't a bad thing. Teacher, he laughed. After he explained a little, Yangwa finally understood. It turned out that Daddy Go Nowhere wished that there would still be people discussing the show even before it was aired. It was just an appeal now. Would the production team listen to the audience's cries? That's impossible. The guest list for every episode of Daddy Go was not only based on the show's own requirements, but there were also major conflicts of interest regarding who was chosen. Poplar Fruit, do you really want to bring Kiki on the show? Teacher, he asked. To be exact, it's not me who wants it, but Kiki wants it. She really likes this show, and Kiki made a wish. I want to help her fulfill it. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, actually, I recommended you in the first season of Daddy Go. Teacher, he suddenly revealed a secret. But unfortunately, Director Xie said that Kiki was too young and didn't agree. Hearing that, Poplar Fruit was surprised. He didn't know that he had a brush with Daddy Go in the first season. But thinking about it, it was true that Kiki was only a little over a year old at that time. Although she was more mature compared to other children her age, she was still young. Director Xie didn't allow it. Poplar Fruit himself would have rejected the invitation if he had received it. There was no need to mention the past. Teacher, he asked Poplar Fruit about his thoughts, and then recommended him again. Don't get your hopes up. Teacher, he said to Poplar Fruit. I can only say that I'll try. It's okay. It doesn't matter if it succeeds or not. Poplar Fruit laughed. If it's not convenient for you, there's no need to recommend me. Poplar Fruit didn't plan to trouble others, including Teacher, he and his fans. This time, the matter was so big that even Teacher, he was alarmed. This was something that Poplar Fruit didn't expect. All along, Poplar Fruit wanted to rely on his own ability to fight for everything he wanted, not rely on nepotism. Including the previous Top 10 award, Poplar Fruit mainly relied on his own reputation and achievements. Today, Poplar Fruit was about to reject Teacher He's kindness, but he swallowed it back down because he suddenly remembered Kiki's wish. For the first time, Poplar Fruit changed his insistence. It's good to have a little hope. After the phone call with Teacher, Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment, but still went online to check the situation. In fact, at first, it was Poplar Fruit's fans who were discussing it. They even dug up a fan suggestion from a year ago. Where are we going, Daddy? We should invite Poplar Fruit and Kiki for the second season. At that time, the fans' reason was that since Zhang Liang could be on Where Are We Going, Daddy, why not invite Poplar Fruit, who had better modeling achievements and looks than Zhang Liang, as a guest? At that time, everyone only discussed it a little and didn't pay much attention to it. However, now that it was dug up, Poplar Fruit and Kiki's fans regretted it. If they had worked harder back then, they would have been able to fulfill Kiki's wish, right? It was because of this guilt that they started to call for Poplar Fruit to be on the show. Poplar Fruit realized that it wasn't just the netizens who were making a fuss. Some media outlets also began to report on this hot topic. In particular, his old flame, Tungsa News, also liked to push this matter to the headlines. Tungsa News also listed the top 10 reasons why Poplar Fruit was qualified to be on the show. The entertainment reporters even said, jokingly, Poplar Fruit, don't belittle yourself. Although you rarely walk around in the entertainment industry, we have never pushed you out of this circle. The voices came one after another, but it was far from the point of forcing him to abdicate. This was because another thing attracted people's attention, that you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.